Hello everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome back to another 3 hours of random Fallout New Vegas locations. The beginning of this video will focus mainly on Zion Valley, and as we finish up there, we'll head on back to the Mojave Wasteland. Now this series is just a compilation of my Unexplored Mojave series. Many of my fans requested this video for various purposes, such as just kind of background noise while working out, or while studying, or while sleeping, or while riding a train, while driving, whatever it might be. I hope you guys enjoy this video. I hope you guys can learn something about Fallout, discover some new locations, and most importantly, have some fun. So sit back, relax, grab a cold one if you want, crack it open, and enjoy. Howdy everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome back to the Unexplored Mojave. Today we're going to be checking out the Sun Sentinels, which is a location on that kind of small island within Zion Valley, surrounded on all sides by the Virgin River. This location is one of the highest points on that said island, along with the Eyrie, which was covered in a previous video. So let's check out the Sun Sentinels. And here you can see the location of Sun Sentinels, just south of Sorrow's Fork Campground and northeast of North Fork Campground. Coming to this location is easiest from Sorrow's Fork. Simply go up the road a bit, then turn around and follow the mountain up to the top of the mountain, which is Sun Sentinels. At the top, there really isn't a whole lot. You have some, obviously, stuff you can loot for crafting, such as Xander root, but besides that, there really isn't much besides two peaks, and I have to say, some truly breathtaking views of Zion Valley. Of course, though, here on the Unexplored Mojave, we want to go above and beyond. We want to try and find other places that players normally wouldn't go to. And while I think Sun Sentinels itself is already a pretty good location because it's kind of out of the way, kind of difficult to get to, I did want to explore some of the surrounding area, and oh boy, did we have a heck of a time of it. So I noticed that there is another mountain to the southeast of Sun Sentinels. I decided to go check it out. Pretty innocent, right? I noticed there was another peak. I noticed that you could get on top and probably continue to get some truly breathtaking views of Zion Valley. But little did I know, this mountain is cursed. Cursed by the rush development of Fallout New Vegas. As I climbed up this ramp, I, for whatever reason, fell through the rock. I tried to replicate this glitch, as you will see later, and I could not do it. Follow's Chalk became incredibly panicked because his friend became literally part of the mountain. He had never seen such witchcraft before. I almost freaked out because I couldn't fast travel away. Contemplating suicide, I was able to finally fast travel. Upon coming back to this mountain, I found out that I was not the only one to be taken in by the mountain. Some unfortunate whitelegs had also been sucked in and eaten by the mountain, unable to escape. A very tragic and scary fate. But as I said before, I made my way back up towards the top of that other mountain, and this time the ramp did not suck me in, much to my astonishment. So that was kind of a one-off glitch. I don't know why it happened, but I'm glad I caught it on tape because I can say it happened. But from the top of this mountain, we can also get some very beautiful views of Zion Valley. Then, of course, I want to show off the other peak on top of the Sun Sentinels. And from up here, we can get some beautiful views of the northern area of Zion Valley. Alright, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Unexplored Mojave. I always have a lot of fun exploring these locations, and when there are glitches and funny stuff like that, I think it really adds a lot to the video, so I'm really happy to record these kinds of incidents. If you guys have any recommendations for the next location, please drop them in the comment section below, and as always, until next time. Howdy everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome back to the Unexplored Mojave. Today we're going to be looking at the Zion Fishing Lodge, which is a location between Sun Sentinels and Windwall Docks. Now this is a location you'll probably have to visit as it is a part of the quest Gone Fishin', which is a required quest for helping out our good friend Joshua Graham. So let's check out Zion Fishing Lodge and some of the surrounding area. And here you can see the location just east of Sun Sentinels, and on this kind of like small island surrounded by the Virgin River. Now, as you approach this L-shaped lodge, there will be some cars and what we can assume was the old parking lot, and then a few picnic tables outside, along with a grill. But nothing really to note outside besides it looks kind of cool, and there's a lot of handprints on the building. Inside, you're going to find some geckos, so definitely make sure to kill them. Follows Chalk did a good job here helping me clear them out. And then the walkie-talkies for the quest going fishing can be found in a cabinet kind of behind that bar area. Now, there is a key for the cabinet if you go in the bathroom. This crate had flamer fuel, which is always useful. And this crate near the shelves also had the key, which is really good. You also get a little message saying you found the key, which I thought was a little bit funny. Then you can open the cabinet, take the walkie-talkies, and just like that, the quest is finished. Really easy kind of quest, but we can explore this fishing lodge, which also features a pool table, so a pretty nice place if you want to go fishing. Then if we head kind of southeast, northeast, east of the fishing lodge, we can find two other marked locations, and these two locations are docks. The first location is Clearwater Docks. This is just northeast of the fishing lodge. There is a hollowed out rock on the other side of the river adjacent to this location, and sometimes if you fast travel here you can find some wildlife such as rad scorpions, giant ants, and Yao Guai. So be careful if you visit this location, as there is a chance you will encounter some very angry creatures. But besides that, there's not a whole lot at this dock, but it is very beautiful and you can really enjoy Zion Valley, trying to imagine yourself going fishing. Then opposite of that, if we head south, we can find the Windwall Docks. Very similar to Clearwater Docks, several different types of wildlife can spawn here, and the one thing to look out for especially are cazadors. But besides that, there are several plants, such as the honey mesquite plants that can be harvested. But again, not a whole lot here, besides, just nature, and you can enjoy Zion Valley. And in between these two docks is a small mountain where you can look at both docks, and you can also see the fishing lodge off in the distance. Obviously, we can use our imagination to think of a bygone era when people would come here to fish for fun, spend their entire day at the lodge, possibly go camping, catch some fish, maybe fry them up on the grill later that night. But this is a very different world than the one that existed over 200 years ago. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Unexplored Mojave. If you have any recommendations for the next video, please post them in the comments section below. And, as always, until next time. Hello everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome back to the Unexplored Mojave. Today we're going to be checking out a few locations. Mainly North Fork Bridge, Patriarchs Campground, and along with some exploration outside of the map. So first we'll start with North Fork Bridge. This is a pretty minor marked location within Zion Valley. Now this bridge is actually based on the real-world North Fork Virgin River Bridge located in Zion National Park. But as you can see in this photo, that bridge is actually significantly different from the bridge in Fallout New Vegas. The New Vegas bridge has been built for cars, while the bridge in real life is only meant for pedestrians. So let's jump into these locations. And here on the mini-map, you can see the location of North Fork Bridge along with Patriarchs Campground. Now this bridge, like I said, is pretty unimpressive. It's literally just a small bridge over the Virgin River. There's nothing underneath it, there's nothing on it besides an old pre-war car, and part of the bridge is missing kind of towards the middle pillar. But besides that, it's just a bridge meant for crossing the river. Of course, you don't actually have to use the bridge to cross the river. Then as we approach Patriarchs Campground, we can find 3 RVs along with various skeletons and suitcases inside of these small RV things. And that's pretty much it. There really isn't a whole lot here. The main attraction at this location is the site above the campground where we can find a crashed airplane. So before going to the airplane, some interesting information on Patriarchs Campground. Patriarchs Campground is based on the real-life geographical site of Court of the Patriarchs, a location within Zion National Park. And on for the main attraction here, the crashed plane. And I tried to do some research about this plane, however I came up empty-handed, at least in regards to the Fallout universe. However, I did find a Reddit post that mentioned that there was an airplane crash over Zion in the year 2000. However, that crash was in Zion, Illinois, and obviously Zion Valley is in Utah. So I'm not so certain that that is the reference here, or if it's just some kind of fun little piece of scenery for the world. No matter what, though, it does add a lot of interesting aesthetic to Zion Valley. And if you visit here with Follows Chalk, you'll have some interesting dialogue about the plane.
That thing actually flew once? Like a big metal bird? Bet you don't have to follow chalk marks up there.
Besides that, do be careful of white legs roaming around the area. While I was trying to film my scenic shots, I got rudely interrupted by a white leg, and Follows Chalk helped me kill him. And then underneath the airplane, we can find some of the wreckage from the crash. We can find a landing gear, along with various skeletons. And then when I was looking at this crashed plane, I was like, how in the hell did it crash in that position? I mean, of course, it's a video game. The developers can put it wherever they want, but just thinking about physics and stuff, I thought it was kind of an interesting way for the plane to crash. My theory is that maybe the plane crashed further up the hill, and then it slid back to its current position, because otherwise it just seems very unlikely the plane would rest right there. Then if we go further up the mountain, we can find a piece of the wing from the airplane, and also next to the skeletons, as you saw, were various sacks filled with loot. But besides that, that is as much as you are supposed to interact with the airplane. But this is the Unexplored Mojave. We want to go to places people don't usually go. So after doing the reload dash glitch several times, I finally launched myself very high, and then I saved before hitting the ground. In Fallout New Vegas, if you save before hitting the ground, you will actually respawn, and your fall, like inertia, will be reset, so you won't die. Then I approached the airplane to see what it was like, and to kind of my disappointment, you just phase through it. There's nothing inside of it. You can't really interact with it. You just see an outline of the plane from the inside. So a bit disappointing, but I thought it was cool nonetheless. After this, I decided to take a more Dr. Bush route and started exploring outside of Zion Valley to see what I could uncover. I only explored a little bit of it though, because it seemed like there probably isn't much outside of it, unlike the Mojave. However, if you guys would like to see more of it in a later video, please let me know in the comments below. But I did find some really cool mountains out of bounds that are actually just kind of copy and paste from other mountains in Zion, so the player can actually climb to the top of these mountains, and you can get some very immaculate views of Zion Valley. And I wanted to go to the tallest mountain in this area, and I found it to actually be quite challenging. I had to use a lot of reload dashing, and when I reached the mountain, the texture and barrier, the hit barrier, is a little bit glitchy, so you kind of have to jump around, and then you can get on it, and then you can climb up this very large ramp, and unfortunately, though, there's some kind of box on top that prevents you from jumping on top. I did try to reload dash up here, but it didn't work. So a little bit unfortunate, but we got really close to the tallest peak in Zion Valley. Perhaps the tallest peak. Then I decided to go to the edge of the world just to see what it looks like. And as you approach, you're going to notice that Zion Valley all collapses into the ground at one point, and then several reload dashes later, and we found ourselves in the never-ending ocean that is the world barrier. This is the same situation for the Mojave Wasteland. If you've ever exited the Mojave Wasteland, it's just an endless ocean that never ends. However, interestingly enough, in the Mojave Wasteland, the ocean is irradiated, so it'll kill you eventually. The ocean in Zion Valley is not irradiated, so you could, in theory, just swim and swim and swim and swim to your heart's content. Alright everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Unexplored Mojave. If you have any recommendations for the next location, please drop them in the comments section below. and I'll do my best to get to them as soon as possible. As always, guys, I really appreciate and just want to give a huge shout out to everyone who watches these videos. It is greatly appreciated. I hope you enjoyed, and as always, until next time. Howdy everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome back to the Unexplored Mojave. Today we're going to be checking out two locations. The General Store, that is in Zion Valley, literally just called General Store, and then Zion Ranger Station. These are two locations that are a part of the quest Tourist Trap, and besides that, there isn't a whole lot here, but there are some kind of cool Easter eggs and stuff, and I actually had quite a lot of fun checking out these locations, so let's dive into it. And as you can see on the mini-map, General Store and Zion Ranger Station are just north of Patriarchs Campground, which we explored in the previous video. And first we'll check out the General Store. This is just an old store that obviously used to be used in Zion National Park, but now it lays abandoned with various handprints on it. Inside we can find a boat fly along with several giant mantises. There's a ton of food on the shelves still, which is a bit surprising, but maybe not so surprising considering the tribes do not enter these places. Then we can find some areas with various toys. Worth noting is the toy cars are giant versions of a toy car. They're much bigger than other versions found throughout the Mojave Wasteland. Then there's also a Zion giant mantis in here, which is a little bit bigger than a normal giant mantis, and me and Follows Chalk killed it pretty easily. Behind the counter, we can find a silenced .22 pistol, along with the Zion National Park snow globe, which will immediately grant you 2,000 caps upon picking it up. So, a pretty good find. And as you may have noticed earlier, in the cash register there is a key which will allow you to open this desk, which contains a little scout lunchbox. There's also an ammunition crate with some .45 ammo in it, and then we can find little scout lunchboxes scattered around this general store, which we need to complete the quest Tourist Trap, as apparently Joshua Graham needs these lunchboxes. And then in this office, we can find a terminal with some interesting entries on it. The first entry talks about an order placed for survival kits that have not arrived yet, and he's angry because it's been 3 weeks since he placed the order, and he has not received his survival kits. The second entry is about the little scout lunchboxes, which we just picked up, and this entry just says that the lunchboxes have arrived and that they're ready to be sold. And we can obviously see this is true. And then the last entry is actually quite humorous. It's about a incorrect order where a ton of toy dinosaurs were sent to this general store, and he says they were meant for some tourist trap in Nevada. That tourist trap, of course, being the giant dinosaur in Novak. And inside of Novak, we can find a similar terminal entry about a missing dino shipment. So, a pretty cool Easter egg to the original Fallout New Vegas, Mojave Wasteland, and Novak. And then outside of the general store, we can find 2 destroyed cars on the side, along with some picnic tables, and behind we can find a couple of dumpsters. Now, this first dumpster just has random loot, but the second dumpster that is open actually has a primer box for a large pistol in it, which is pretty decent. And then if we head up on over the cliff on this little hill, we can find the next location, which is right next to the general store, Zion Ranger Station. Now, again, this is a part of the quest, Tourist Trap, and we need to find some medical supplies inside, so let's check it out. So as I was approaching Zion Ranger Station for the first time, I noticed it had an actual sign above it, which is obviously a specialty sign. It just says Zion National Park, Ranger Station. So I just thought it was pretty cool and adds to the theme. Now inside you're going to find a lot of bark scorpions, which were no problem for me and Follows Chalk. And there's also a fireplace inside along with some fire logs. And above the fireplace are 3 teddy bears. And behind the teddy bear on the left is some 12.7mm rounds. So definitely take those rounds. And I also love the skeleton or the skull on the box. That is something I never noticed before. And then inside we can find the contaminated medical kit And here we'll have a few options to replace or salvage all of the materials. You can also choose to clean them if you have alcohol on you. So you have a couple of options in order to progress the quest. There's also a locked footlocker next to it, which has some 45 ammunition along with a 45 auto pistol. Now there's another ammunition box that is locked, and upon opening this ammunition box, you will find some more random ammunition. And then if we head around the back of it, we can actually find a very interesting scene. So there's a hollowed out log on this rock, and then if we jump up on the roof, we can find a lawn chair, some 45 auto cases, along with a skeleton with a tomahawk in the head or the back of the skull of the skeleton. Then we also have some powder for a pistol, and also a primer box, again, for a large pistol. So a very interesting scene, but I don't know what was going on here, but obviously this person was killed by a tomahawk. So a pretty cool scene. But there you have it. General Store and Zion Ranger Station. These are both pretty generic locations that are meant mainly just to progress the main quest, but they still offer some very beautiful scenes of Zion National Park, or Zion Valley. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Unexplored Mojave. If you have any recommendations for the next video, please post them in the comment section below. And as always, until next time. Howdy everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome back to the Unexplored Mojave. Today we're going to be checking out Ranger Substation Osprey. This is a location just northeast of Zion Ranger Station where we visited in the last video. Now this is a part of a series of substations scattered around Zion Valley that would have been used in the pre-war era for the National Park Service to maintenance and to provide safety to the park. So let's go ahead and check it out. And as you can see here on the mini-map, Ranger Substation Osprey is right northeast of Zion Ranger Station and the general store. And I figure I would go ahead and show you the hike up to the substation. You're going to pass through this little archway, and you're going to see several orange and yellow trees making a very beautiful climb to the top of this hill. And then you will see the substation poke out from behind the rocks. From the top, you can get a very beautiful view of Zion Valley. You also notice that there is a cage here and what appears to be a locked cell door. This is a part of the quest, Prisoners of War, and this is an optional quest where during the final leg of the game, of Honest Hearts, you have to rescue several Sorrows who have been captured by the Whitelegs. Inside of the cell, we can find a toolbox, which will have a cattle prod in it, which is an interesting weapon because it doesn't kill your enemies, it just knocks them unconscious. And there's also some ammunition within the cell. Up top, we can find a toolbox, and during the quest, Prisoners of War, it'll have a key in it to unlock the cell if you don't have the required lockpick skill. There's also a duffel bag with some random loot in it that had some good ammunition for me. But besides that, not a whole lot of loot in this area. We can see an old pre-war radio tower that has obviously collapsed, probably due to rust and the elements. There's a nearby mountain that we can climb up, and from the top we can get some very immaculate views of the surrounding area. I've been playing this DLC for a while now on this channel. I have to say this place is absolutely beautiful. Obsidian did a really good job capturing the beauty of Zion Valley, even if Zion Valley is not so, geographically speaking, accurate to the real world. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed. If you have any recommendations for the next location, please post them in the comment section below. And, as always, until next time. Howdy everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome back to the Unexplored Mojave. Today we're going to be taking a look at Caterpillar's Mound. This is a location in the northern part of Zion Valley, and the name comes from this rock formation in the middle of the river here, and the rock formation on top of this small hill or mound appears to be a caterpillar. However, I do think it also looks a bit like a centaur from the Fallout universe, but either way, centaur, caterpillar, what's the difference? Anyways, let's go ahead and check out Caterpillar's Mound and some of the surrounding area. And here on the map, you can see the location, as I said, northern part of the map, kind of northwestern, and we're also going to explore this little gorge, kind of in the shape of a whale's tail, and we're going to see what's up there as well. Now, as I approached this location, I noticed that there was some kind of NPC kind of just crouching below and walking away. I found out later that it was a white leg. As I came down this hill, I found this hollowed out rock, so always worth checking. However, usually they contain pretty minor loot. Then as you approach Caterpillar's Mound, there's another smaller island with a crashed boat and some sacks that you can loot for some food and other supplies, but not a whole lot really. Investigating the mound, we can just find it's a small hill in the middle of the river, like I said before, with a small tree on top, and then of course the caterpillar itself. Kind of interesting. There's also some xander root up on top. Now I try to get on the head of the caterpillar and I started getting shot from the white legs. So definitely make sure to come prepared as there might be enemies around this area. But using the anti-material rifle, I made quick work of them, and then this guy's body glitched out for some reason. But besides that, there really isn't a whole lot around this mound, so that's when I decided to go ahead and investigate the northwestern area, this kind of gorge. And this area has a lot more things of interest, even though it's an unmarked area. It's just some kind of valley or gorge with an encampment at the back. Now, as you enter the valley, there's going to be this kind of small mountain, and we can climb up top to get a very good view of the Virgin River, along with the entrance to the Narrows. So, some pretty nice views, as we always find in Zion Valley. Now, I have to say, though, this rain is kind of a downer, because I don't think it's as beautiful with the rain, but I do like the addition of weather. Now, as you push further back into this gorge, you're going to find these spore plants along with some spore carriers. Obviously, a group of survivors from Vault 22 made their way to Zion Valley, and with them they brought the infection, or fungus, that infects humans and other plants, causing them to become these spore carriers. Now, I actually got kind of lucky here, because I was kind of walking backwards to avoid the spore carriers, but I could have easily have walked off the back of the cliff and killed myself. So definitely be prepared if you come here. There are quite a few enemies in this little encampment, and while this area is unmarked and there's nothing here, this small encampment leads me to believe that perhaps the Vault 22 survivors used this area for some time as kind of one of their bases of operation before the infection took hold. Obviously, though, there's no evidence for that because this is unmarked and there's nothing really here noting to that, but we can make assumptions based on the enemies. In the very back, we can find a skeleton along with a sack with all kinds of good loot inside of it, mainly chems and medical supplies. And then again, as we make our way up this cliff, we can get some really beautiful views of the gorge. But besides that, there's not much in this gorge, and there's no explanation as to what is going on here, so we're only left to our own assumptions. And I did try to do some research about Caterpillar Mound and to try and find out if it's a real formation in real life, and I came up empty-handed. However, in Zion National Park, there are a plethora of caterpillars, and after looking at the website for Zion National Park, I found a lot of warnings about caterpillars, especially when camping. So it does seem to be a place that is heavily inhabited by caterpillars, but I couldn't really find any information about some kind of rock formation, but I thought it was an interesting fact nonetheless. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. If you have any recommendations for the next location, please drop them in the comment section below, and as always, until next time. After several days of trekking across Zion Valley, we finally arrived at the Narrows.
The dead horse has told me details about the attack on your caravan. A stranger's sympathy might not count for much, but for what it's worth, I'm sorry. The Sorrows will mourn your friends too. They mourn everyone, even the Whitelegs. They have sensitive souls. Innocent, if there is such a thing. In spite of what's happened, I hope that Joshua and I can help you out of here. But to be frank, we need your help too.
And as we enter the Narrows, we will be greeted by Waking Cloud. She will tell us that Daniel has been waiting for us, and that she knows who we are. We can also ask her about her glove, which you might want to do in order to activate another quest, but I feel like that's a subject for another video. For now, Waking Cloud will just take us to Daniel within Sorrow's camp. And here's the location of Sorrow's camp in the far northern region of Zion Valley. Now, as we move up Sorrow's camp here in the Narrows, you're going to find a lot of bridges and like huts and stuff on the side of the mountain. Clearly, the Sorrows have inhabited this place for some time. Then, of course, it starts raining. And here we can see we discover Sorrow's camp about halfway through the camp, and then we can make our way to Daniel, who we heard at the beginning of the video. Now, Daniel is a new Canaanite who is just aiding the Sorrows, and basically we can choose to help him evacuate the Sorrows or to try and encourage him to have him and the Sorrows stay and fight against the Whitelegs. And we will get back to the story later once we meet back up with Joshua Graham. But for now, some interesting facts about the Narrows. Now, the in-game Narrows is based on the real-life Narrows found in Zion National Park, and this is one of the most accurate locations within Fallout New Vegas's Zion Valley. Now, as I've said in other videos, the developers for Zion Valley and Honest Hearts in general took a lot of creative liberty in order to create the world and fit it into the narrative. But here we can actually see a somewhat accurate representation of the Narrows. And we can continue further up the Narrows and we will find several waterfalls that kind of create a mist that hide parts of the canyon from us. And we can see our good friend Daniel walking up the canyon himself. As we get towards the back of the canyon, you're going to find a fork in the road, one that kind of slopes up, and then that one that kind of goes into this small pond. If you dive into this pond, you can find a skeleton along with a suitcase, and the suitcase had some pre-war money and a stim pack in it, so not bad. Also, you'll notice that Walking Cloud is our new companion, and I send follows Chalk back to Angel Cave. Then as we move up, we can find Half Moose Cave. There's also a boulder outside that appears to have crushed a poor soul. I'm sure this will be referenced in a later video. Now, if we go to Half Moose Cave, this cave is actually full of sorrows and is a friendly cave. Some of the caves around here, which we will explore, are actually quite dangerous, so you have to be careful when you go inside. I didn't know what to expect when I entered, but I just found it was full of friendlies. But there's not much inside of this cave besides just some sorrows living their day-to-day lives. And then this cave actually has two exits, so we can take the other exit and it'll take us towards the top of the Narrows, as you can see here. And there's a little pond in front of us, and then we can climb up. Then I found these geckos, and there are supposed to be friendly geckos here, but for whatever reason, they just disappeared along with that one NPC. I have no idea what's going on, but we got some ghost geckos. Back towards the entrance, we can find Sweet Flower Cave. I kind of walked near here in the intro of this video. Inside of this, we can find an abandoned camp along with some mole rats, so make sure to come prepared in order to kill the mole rats. Now, it appears something very bad happened in here. There are several skeletons along with various loot, especially like food and empty soda bottles, and these skeletons appear to be somewhat small, so perhaps these were some kind of Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts who were at the wrong place at the wrong time. I mean, not that there is any right place during the nuclear apocalypse. And after killing the mole rats, I was looking around and I found an interesting thing of trail mix, and I found these actually elsewhere in Zion Valley, but it's just a lunchbox, but it says trail mix on it. I just thought it was interesting. But besides that, there's not a whole lot in this cave, so we can head back out and head on to our next cave, which is Glass Chime Cave. And inside of this cave, we're going to find some Whitelegs, so definitely be prepared to fight them. So I think this kind of demonstrates what kind of dire situation the Sorrows are in. They literally have Whitelegs camping out right at their doorstep, or literally inside of their doorstep. This is supposed to be their territory, yet they cannot defend it. Of course, the Sorrows do not want to fight, so the Whitelegs have an obvious advantage here that can allow them to infiltrate their base. and they can get ready for an ambush or whatever it is that they're planning here. Now, you can try and loot in here, but there is not a whole lot in the way of loot besides anything that the white legs have on them. Sometimes they carry some pretty good weapons, and of course they might have ammo and things like anti-venom on them, which are always good. So take them out. Now, I've actually found white legs to be a pretty difficult enemy in Fallout New Vegas, even more so than the marked men in Lonesome Road. The white legs just have a lot more health than other enemies, so it's been a good challenge, but having a companion has made it a lot easier, admittedly. So we can keep looting around, but there's nothing inside, and then we can head on to the next cave, and this cave here is Whitebird's Cave. However, that's a cave for another video. There's a special quest associated with that one. So we're going to move on to Crossroads Cavern. And this cave has another exit like the one before, along with a fork in the road. Now, according to the wiki, there can be a massive lag spike here, causing the game to crash on Xbox and PC. However, that did not happen to me, but maybe something to be aware of. Now, if you go right at the fork like I did, you're going to find another camp of white legs. So definitely make sure to clear them out because, well, there's no reason not to, or else they're just going to attack the Sorrows. Once you've killed them, of course, you can loot around their camp, but there isn't a whole lot. I found some Rataway and some skeletons, along with some more trail mix, but besides that, not a whole lot. Now, if we come back out and go to the left in the fork, we just find a straight path towards the exit, and there's a couple of coyotes guarding the exit, but for a player such as ourselves, and I'm sure a player such as yourself, it is no problem. We finally enter this final chamber that is quite beautiful, if I do say so myself. This has been one of my favorite caves in all of New Vegas, purely from an aesthetic perspective. I just love the beams of light coming through, and then the orange and white glowing mushrooms. I think it's a really cool scene within Fallout New Vegas and within Zion Valley. And the last cave worth noting is Stone Bones Cave. However, I do have to say, this is a story for another time. As for now, there's not a whole lot else we can do in the Narrows besides some side quests, which will be mentioned more in another video. And I decided to try and exit the map. However, I could not do it, but I could get to the top area, and you can get some pretty darn decent views of the Narrows, as you can see here. But I couldn't leave the map. These mountains are truly just too tall, and it really gives a reason for the Narrows' namesake. And with that, we will make our way towards the exit of Zion Valley. Now, as we exit, we will be greeted by our good friend Joshua Graham, who has a lot of explaining about what is happening and about our future objective, so feel free to take a listen.
By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. Yea, we wept, when we remembered Zion. Remember, O Lord, the children of Edom in the day of Jerusalem, who said, raise it even to the foundation. O daughter of Babylon, who ought to be destroyed, happy shall he be that rewardeth thee as thou hast served us. Happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stones. Do you know what it means? Given those two choices, yes. In the best of all possible worlds, they would just leave us in peace. But they won't. I don't enjoy killing, but when done righteously, it's just a chore, like any other. Practiced hands make for short work, and the good Lord knows there's much to be done here. Happy are those who do the work of the Lord. Zion belongs to God and the people of God. It is a natural temple and monument to his glory. When our Lord entered the temple and found it polluted by money changers and beasts, did he ask them to leave? Did he cry? Did he simply walk away? No. He drove them out. It is one thing to forgive a slap across my cheek, but an insult to the Lord requires... No. It demands correction. I and the dead horses are prepared to do what must be done to protect Zion from the White Lakes. And though Daniel won't accept it yet, there are many sorrows who are also prepared. They may not be warriors, but this is their home. If you have a chance to speak with Daniel about this, ask him to consider defending Zion instead of abandoning it. He has good intentions, but I fear that if we evacuate the sorrows from this place, it will be lost to them, and us, forever.
Alright everyone, thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed. If you have any recommendations for the next location, please post them in the comments section below. And, as always, until next time. Howdy everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome back to the Unexplored Mojave. Today we're going to be looking at several locations across Zion Valley. These locations include White Bird's Cave, Vault 22, Dweller's Guard Camp, and Ghost Den. This will be a bit of a special video as it's going to showcase one of my favorite quests, Rite of Passage, in the entire Fallout universe. I really love this quest. It's just kind of quirky, and it's everything that I love about Fallout. So in order to start this quest, you first need to make your way to the Narrows and talk to Walking Cloud. However, just by talking and offering assistance to Daniel, the quest will automatically be started. But also you can start the quest by asking Walking Cloud about her bear or Yao Guai gauntlet that she is wielding. So let's dive in to these locations. So the first location is White Bird's Cave. This is where you can kind of begin the quest. It's located in the very back of the Narrows, which we covered in the previous video. So as you enter White Bird's Cave, you'll notice it's just a really tiny cave that is home to White Bird, who's kind of a shaman, who tells us this.
Hola, outsider. Welcome, child of omens. You come to receive visions of truth? Take drugs, kill a bear, seek medicine plant, return with sacred datura root. Receive visions of truth, they guide you. Go. Return, maybe yes. Return, maybe no. But go.
And perhaps my favorite quote in all of Fallout, take drugs, kill a bear. This is a reference to the Advice Animals meme that was popular at the time. And this is only accessible using the Wild Wasteland perk. But anyways, after this we have to go find Datura. One's located at the top of the Narrows, kind of where you can find those friendly geckos. And the next one is located next to Stone Bones Cave. And the final Datura plant is found by this small pond near the entrance. Now there is a quest marker to guide you to all of these locations. And also any Datura plant will work. You only need 3, and there are tons scattered around Zion Valley. But once you have 3 of them, take them back to Whitebird.
You have root of sacred datura? These roots make sacred vision tea. You drink, you see path before you. Ready? Drink. Tea is strong. Tea is bitter. Wisdom is strong. Wisdom is bitter. You see? You go to cave. Find ghost of she. Lay ghost to rest. This your quest. Bring peace where was strife. Go.
And after drinking the tea, we will remain high until completion of the quest. Our vision will be blurry, and all of these colors will be kind of purpley and bright. So we definitely want to make our way to kill the ghost of she. In order to do this, we have to kind of go to the northeastern part of the map at this little inlet, as you can see here on the mini-map. Now, as you approach here, you're going to have to go through the Vault 22 guards camp, because you can see here this cliff prevents you from accessing Ghost Den. So we have to go over here to the Vault 22 guards camp, and if you know anything about Vault 22, we're going to have to fight some spores. And of course, there's going to be spore plants along with some spore carriers. So make sure you come prepared. At one point, I got a little bit overwhelmed, and Walking Cloud maybe almost died. I don't think she was that close, but her dialogue shifted to saying that she was going to die, but I was able to make sure she didn't. So come prepared and be ready, because there's a lot of enemies here that can attack you. As you can see here, we have giant green geckos, along with spore carriers, spore plants, and of course Yao Guai, which is what the Ghost of Shay is. But keep making your way towards where the Ghost of Shay is. For now, I decided to ignore the camp, and we'll come back to it later, because it's no fun to explore when my vision is blurry, and you can't tell what the heck I'm looking at. And as you get closer to Shay, you're going to find some geckos along with some Yao Guai cubs. So take them out like I did, and then you can fight the Ghost of Shay. Now the Ghost of Shay can be a bit difficult because one, well, you're high as heck, and also it's a pretty strong enemy that can kind of heal itself, as you'll see here in a bit. From up top, you can get some pretty good views of the surrounding area, but of course our vision is blurred, so we won't worry about that at this time. As you approach the back of this canyon, there will be nothing, but as you move forward, the Ghost of Shay will spawn. This is a flaming Yao Guai that is very aggressive and can be hard to kill. Thankfully, the Yao Guai targeted Walking Cloud, and I was able to quickly kill it using my Riot Shotgun. Nothing in Fallout New Vegas is a match for the Riot Shotgun, maybe the best weapon in the game. I then leveled up to level 50, and I have to say, this might be the best way I've ever accomplished level 50 in Fallout New Vegas, killing a flaming Yao Guai while high, called the Ghost of Shay. Make sure you take the paw from the Ghost of Shay, and then you can return to White Bird, and he will give you a very special weapon.
Does Ghost of She like quiet and grave? Then visions of truth are at an end. Will you learn from truth? Maybe yes, maybe no. Only for you to decide. Here, take. Gift to remind you of visions. Use well, or sell to curious trader. Either way, says much about you.
And Whitebird is brutally honest about what you can do with the weapon, She's Embrace, which is a unique variant of the Yao Guai Gauntlet. Now that we are not high anymore, we can head over and actually look at these locations. Here you can see them on the minimap, Ghost Den and Vault 22, Dweller's Guard Camp. Now, at the camp, there is not a whole lot here, really. There's a lot of dead bodies and a whole lot of, carnage and wreckage. Not really sure what happened here, but clearly something went down. Then if we move up to the ghost camp, there will be more Yao Guai cubs that have respawned or just spawned after killing their, assumingly, mother of the Ghost of Shay. At the top of this kind of plateau, there is a hollowed out log that has some anti-venom and some food and dirty water. So the anti-venom is of course pretty good. And then we can head back to the back of this canyon where we can see that there are tons of human skulls, Brahmin skulls, along with Brahmin cartridges. So lots of dead bodies and skeletons, and here is the unique Yao Guai Gauntlet, She's Embrace. This is one of my favorite quests in the game. It's just very kind of quirky, very fun, and it just kind of resembles a lot of things that I think Fallout should be. But there might be one thing that we missed back at the Vault 22 Guards Camp, so let's go take a look at that. But real quick, just a huge shout out. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you guys enjoy what is about to come next. Thank you so much. And back at the Vault 22 Dwellers Guard Camp, we can find a holotape. And on this holotape is a message which reads, "If you're reading this message, do yourself a favor and turn and run straight out of this canyon. For near 11 months, my people have been engaged in daily battle with an evil spirit of this place. Arriving February of last year with a party 118 strong, we were attacked by primitives and forced to defend ourselves. Whereupon something began killing us in wide numbers. We have done our absolute best to find and kill this thing. thinking it was a man because it uses our firearms against us, and traps of all kinds. But no man could defy our efforts as this thing has. It is more evil than any man could be. We have been reduced to just 34 of our number. We have lost 6 overseers before me. Some have perished from the sickness in their lungs we carried out of the vault. But that number is small next to the count of friends that this thing has murdered. Now that I am finally made overseer, we are leaving straight away, and will not return. If you have come to this seeming paradise seeking the fresh water, abundant game, and shelter you suppose you will find here, do not be deceived. You will find only death here. Leave it once, and put miles between you and this place. May God have mercy on us all. J. Hendricks, Overseer, Vault 22 Expedition. And with that, make sure to tune in next time for one of my favorite stories of all time, and we will learn more about the evil spirit.
In the year 1945, my great-great-grandfather, serving in the army, wondered when he'd get to go home to his wife and the son he'd never seen. He got his wish when the U.S. ended World War II by dropping atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In the 21st century, people awoke from the American dream. Years of consumption led to shortages of every major resource. The entire world unraveled. Peace became a distant memory.
Vault-Tec stock continues to rise as tensions with China reach an all-time high. With the world poised on the brink of war, Vault-Tec is reporting a record number of reservations. We do have coming in. That's confirmed reports. I repeat, confirmed reports of nuclear detonations.
One death is a tragedy, a million deaths are a statistic. This is a quote that is often attributed to Joseph Stalin. However, there is no evidence that Stalin ever said this. Instead, this most likely originated from Kurt Tucholsky, who was a German journalist and writer. And while this quote is somewhat dark, it does carry an ounce of truth. It's very easy for the human mind to comprehend 1 in smaller numbers, but when we get to 1 million, it's much more difficult. But even 1 million, I think, can be comprehended. For example, if we had $1 million in $1 bills and we extended these $1 bills end to end, it would extend for 97 miles, roughly, or 156 kilometers. Now, 100 miles is a long distance, no doubt, but the human mind can imagine it. But let's do that with $1 billion. If you had 1 billion $1 bills and laid them end to end, it would measure 96,900 miles and would extend around the Earth almost 4 times. That is a really big number, so let's bring it down to a more manageable number, 45. And 45 is much more reasonable. For example, most humans could easily think of 45 people that they know or have known, and do it pretty effortlessly. And 45 is also the winter population of the Kerguelen Islands in the southern Indian Ocean, one of the most remote places on Earth. This remote island is owned by the French, and there's always researchers on the island. And if we increase the scale, by the year 2077, according to Worldometer, there will be over 10 billion people on planet Earth. No small number indeed. And in the Fallout universe, relations between China and the United States reached their boiling point in the year 2077, resulting in a nuclear war. We can estimate that around 10 billion people died during the course of this war, the deadliest and perhaps one of the shortest wars in human history. And while the destruction and mayhem caused by nuclear war would be immense, humanity would still survive. In places like the Kerguelen Islands, people would continue to live. It might not be a very good existence, but life would continue. Even in the Fallout universe, not every inch of America was touched by nuclear fire. Some parts were left unscathed, and that is just where our friend Randall Clark found himself at the time of the Great War. Whether he is lucky or unlucky is up to you to decide. And this is where our story begins. One person, one individual, one story. It's easy to say in Fallout that 10 billion people died in an instant, but what does that really mean? Hopefully the story of Randall Clark can help shed some light on what that means. When you first arrive at Zion Valley, you have to make your way to Angel Cave in order to meet up with Joshua Graham. After a meeting with Joshua Graham, you are free to exit Angel Cave from a second entrance. This second entrance will lead you to an elevated area that is otherwise inaccessible, that overlooks the Eastern Virgin River. However, there's not really a whole lot here. There's a small camp and some dead horses walking around, and occasionally Joshua Graham himself will come out and walk around. Here on the minimap, you can see the location of this elevated platform. Now, just when you think there's really nothing of interest here besides a nice view, over by this cliff we can find a handprint and a duffel bag. This duffel bag has various good loot inside of it, and after looting the bag, you'll get a marker for Survivalist's Bounty. This is our first indication that there are more of these bags littered around Zion. Again, as you approach Angel Cave, you might stumble upon a small cave tucked behind the canyon. This is called Fallen Rock Cave, and inside we can begin to learn about the survivalist. And here on the minimap, you can see the location of Fallen Rock Cave, almost directly north of Angel Cave. Approaching the cave is easy, as it is just off the banks of the East Virgin River. Inside the cave, we will find several tripwires along with landmines, so definitely make sure to tread carefully. Whoever lived here before was very paranoid. And as we move further in, we can find the frag mines. Now, these frag mines will kind of blend in with the ground, so you have to be careful. This frag mine is upside down, and it really blends in with the ground. As we continue to push forward, we find a fork in the road, and we decide to go right. Heading right, we will find another tripwire, and then 2 frag mines. However, I almost missed that frag mine right there, and I got very lucky. And eventually we will stumble upon a large central chamber, and it appears that someone or something has been living in here, and they left us a frag mine underneath a teddy bear as a welcoming gift. There's various loot in this small camp. Some of the loot includes these drained microfusion cells next to this terminal. Interesting that there's a terminal in a cave. Now there's also some wooden crates and a workbench that we can use, and a reloading bench, making this a good place for player housing. And as we look over, we will find another one of those duffel bags, those survivalist sacks that contains pretty good loot inside of it. this time having ammo, bobby pins, and a lot of ammunition. And upon reading the terminal, we find 2 entries, and they read, Year 2077, October 28th, 5 days on foot, still can't sleep. Outside, it's like nothing happened. Sky looks wrong, that's all. Hike back to overturned Nat Guard truck near Torqueville? After blisters heal, maybe. Looks like USGS team was researching something here in cave. Cleared out when bombs fell, left equipment behind. Probably thought they had families to run back to. October 29th. Shar must have said this out loud 1,000 times walking here. Maybe writing it will feel more like you heard. You were right. I was north of Spanish Fork. Took the 77 along Provo Bay to steer clear of town. Would have been home in an hour. Engine died, truck just stopped. So did a Chrysalis in the other lane. Knew right away. First nuke hit Salt Lake City inside a minute. I was looking south. Lucky man. Flash behind me so bright world looked on fire. Old couple from the Chrysalis starts screaming they can't see. Didn't watch you die, Shar. Saved my eyes. Counted 12 more flashes next 7 minutes. Ground shook each time. 18 seconds later. When nothing hit for half hour, took a look. Global fire where you and Alex died. Didn't kid myself. Didn't know what to do. Grabbed my pack and rifle. Saw to the old couple. Sat them up against car. Let them hold and comfort each other. Told them I was going to get help. Everything will be okay. 1 bullet through both heads. Instant. 5-day hike back to Zion. You told me. Stop running off to the wild. Man belongs with his family. You were right. You were right. You were right. You were right. Wasn't there to hold you and my boy. Died without me. Never touch you or him again. Should shoot myself. Maybe I deserve. Can't. Maybe soon. October 31st. Black rain falling outside. Geiger jumping. Should let it kill me, but bottling water from back of the cave all the same. November 2nd. Sounds dead outside, but can't look. Geiger goes lethal 15 feet from the cave mouth. Do the math. Radiation goes down before water runs out, or I never leave this cave. The next entry is year 2078. January 1st. Happy New Year. 2 months in cave. Still lethal outside. Don't get it. An army they said 2 to 4 weeks cleared fallout. Less than a month's water left. Been mopping condensation off cave walls, wriggling shirt into bottles, trading calories for H2O. Food stocks holding. Thanks, USGS. If there was even a chance I'd see the 2 of you again, I'd run outside. January 10th. Sounded like windstorm out there for 2 days. Radiation down 500. What happened? January 15th. Took a peek. Snow. It glows green. January 28th. Radiation low enough I could risk short exposure outside. More important, cave stream now drinkable if I use rad drugs. January 30th. There is nothing alive out there. And with that, we have one of our best and most harrowing accounts of what happened in the Great War. In the back of the cave, we can find the stream that Randall Clark used for weeks in the immediate aftermath of the Great War for water. And as we make our way out of the cave, there are more traps waiting for us. And there is a bouquet of grenades above our head that we cannot reach. However, if we jump, we are able to reach it. And now we can exit the cave. Now, this is only the beginning of Randall Clark's story. Little did he know he had a far larger importance to play in the world. And here we can see a man who used to serve in the army, who was paranoid and worried about war, who was not with his family when the bombs dropped. An absolutely terrible fate. So our next location is Two Skies Cave. This is a location just north of the spine. So it is a location that players might easily stumble upon at the beginning of the game. So let's check it out. And here's the location on the minimap of the cave. And just like the previous cave, we're going to want to be very careful as we trek through this place because there are traps all over the place. Early on in our playthrough, we came across a fork in the road. You can go left or right. I decided to go right for now. And then we came to another fork that goes left and right. However, there is a trip wire right here, and it's kind of disguised by these branches. So please be careful of that. And then there's the shotgun, which would be activated by the tripwire in that bush. As we make our way down, we find a flooded section of the cave. And it isn't too long, so if you don't have the rebreather, then you can just make it to the other side pretty easily, which opens up into this large central chamber. And on the banks of this chamber to the west, there will be a door. But be careful as you approach because there are 2 plasma mines on the ground. I managed to disable one, however I couldn't get the other one. I panicked and I just kind of backed off to let it safely detonate. There's also a bear trap next to the door, so be mindful of that. And after picking the average locked door, we come into a little chamber where obviously somebody had made a living. There are some dishes, a campfire, some logs to sit around. Underneath this kind of wooden platform, we can find a campfire sack, which has some junk inside of it. Then going up on this wooden platform, we can find another survival cache with all kinds of helpful materials inside of it. Besides that, there's just some junk and then a bedroll and like 2 makeshift beds. And then this larger kind of rest area with a reloading bench and an explosives crate. Inside the explosives crate is some dynamite and other scrap. And then we can find the next terminal from Randall Clark, and the entries read, Year 2083, May 5th. The comeback goes on. Add prickly gear to the list of survivors with honey mesquite and banana yucca. Odd nodules, mutations, but safe to eat. Harvesting, oh so careful, never take more than a 5th. Mouth waters every time I'm about to eat something that isn't from a can. May 7th. Clouds of those stinging flies near fallen tree I call the napper. Little flashes in the cloud. Something dragonfly size that zaps them mid-air then scoops them up. Something new. May 19th. Bighorn sheep. A family. Ram, ewe, and little one. Fucking goddamn it. May 20th. The sheep were different, brawny. Ewe had curved horns just like the ram. Seen some tiny lizards, but this is first time seen animals that big. Fingers crossed. 5-10 years breeding, fresh meat, hides, horns. I know it's time to go back, Shar, when winter has passed. Year 2084. June 14th. Just got back, tired, good scrounging along the way, ended up dragging back a cart of stuff. Right tomorrow, sleep. June 15th. Departed April 10th. Walked to Salt Lake City took 15 days. Would have been 7 to 9 back in the old days, but had to circle pockets of radiation and forged along the way. Don't know what I was thinking. Imagine I'd find my house, dig through rubble, find something. Your bones, I hoped, and little nuts. Would have buried them, here in Zion maybe. Salt Lake City is mostly craters, warped steel girders where high-rises sat, mounds of bricks. Never found our house, didn't even find street. What wasn't a crater was scorched clean. Want to believe it was fast. A flash, both of you vaporized. Lies to make me feel better. I'll never know. Which part of the city got hit first? Northeast, and you both died in a blink. Farther away, and you burned alive screaming, or the blast broken glass and bits of brick, and wood splinters shredding you like hamburger. Look at it, coward, and listen. Don't turn away. Face it. If you'd been brave, lucky man, you would have found a spot and blown your brains out. But not you. You took your time walking back, made a shopping trip of it. Scrounger. The truck was still there on the 77 north of Spanish Fork. The Chrysalis, too. But no sign of the old couple's bones. Outside Nephi, I caught a trail. 3 men, tracks heading toward Fountain Green. Thought about following but didn't. Stupid fantasy of friends. More likely cannibals. June 20th. Took 2 days to build door and electrify it. No soliciting, assholes. Home sweet fucking home. Next, year 2095. September 20th. I count 28 of them. 11 adult males, 8 females, 9 children aged 2 to 10. Some rifles and pistols in bad repair. Old world clothes. Ratty. September 22nd. Got close enough last night to hear them talk. Spanish, I think. From Mexico? Heard them say paradiso a bunch. Think that means paradise. Here to stay then. Seem harmless. Seem. October 5th. The one I call Maria is pregnant. Think the father is Jose, but she spends a lot of time with Pablo too. October 7th. Pedro ran out to pee in the stream and would have seen me if he looked to his left. Too close. Need to give them space. November 10th. Jose broke his leg chasing a bighorn. Too far from camp for them to hear. Told myself to leave it but couldn't. 300 yards from their camp, did my best Jose screaming imitation until a bunch of them came looking. Then strung them along to the crest where they could hear the real Jose. Probably useless. Compound fracture, broke the skin. November 11th. Infection. So many goddamn words nearly the same. Think I'd be fluent. But anyway, Jose's leg has got it, so he's going to die. Nature for you. Of course they're giving prayer a try. November 12th. Left a bottle of antibiotics on a rock outside their camp last night. They thank God, Dios, of course, as though that asshole saw fit to burn the world, but still cared enough to leave some medicine on a rock. November 15th. Jose will always limp, but otherwise he'll be okay. Good deed for the month. Will they make it through the winter? And with that, we can see that our friend Randall Clark is actually a fairly good person. He does want to help people, but he wants to stay reclusive, probably because he cannot trust anyone. After that, we can find the electrified door that he was talking about. There's also an average lock terminal if you come from the other side that will shut down the electric fence, or you can destroy the generator like I did. But here we learn about a Mexican group of Mexicans coming through Zion Valley that Randall Clark decided to help. After that, we shall continue our adventure through Zion. Also, based on the previous entries, we can see that Randall Clark apparently stayed at Two Skies Cave for a significant period of time, over 10 years. Which is pretty remarkable. The first entry was in 2083, and the second entry was in 2095, but for whatever reason, Randall Clark moved far north to the Narrows to Stone Bones Cave. And as I just said, Stone Bones Cave is located in the Narrows, kind of on the middle part here, but you're going to need to climb up the Narrows a bit in order to reach this location. As we enter, we can kind of see where the cave gets its name. The stones in here kind of form bones. These stalagmites. On the ground are 3 dead bodies. Who knows what happened to them, if they were unfortunate souls who stumbled upon this cave and faced Randall Clark's traps, or if they were killed by Randall Clark himself. As we move forward, we have to be careful because of several booby traps. I was not careful and accidentally stepped in a bear trap, injuring my leg. We continue making our way through, being careful, knowing that we could easily die due to these centuries-old traps. As we reached the top of this hill, we found a bucket which we could not move. We can assume perhaps it was nailed to the ground with a mine behind it. Came to a fork in the road and I went left, going into this large central chamber where we can assume Randall Clark made his living for a significant period of time. And in this area we can see it would make for a good place for player housing because there is a workbench and a reloading bench, and then we have a reloading bench footlocker with nothing really inside of it. On top of this platform we can find another survival cache, again with various loot, and a bedroll where we can sleep. Across from the terminal we can find some Desert Ranger armor, which you definitely want to pick up, because if you finish Honest Hearts and you don't pick it up, it will disappear forever. And that would be quite unfortunate, as it is a unique variant of the Ranger armor. Right now I was wearing Riot armor from Lonesome Road, and now I'm wearing the Desert armor, and as you can see it is unique, and it once belonged to our friend Randall Clark. On the terminal we can find 2 entries which read, Year 2096, February 11th. Fuckers killed all the men. I think they would have taken the woman alive, but Marina and Selena opened fire, and some of the others went for their guns, so they shot them down, and some of the kids with them. If I could have warned them. February 12th. Elena and Carmen and 5 children still alive, being kept in a pen. There are more than 100 of these assholes in blue suits. Every suit says 22 on the back. Why? Armed to the teeth with submachine guns, pistols, estimate 60% male. Everyone seems to follow the dark-haired guy, but can't get close enough to tell. Assholes are disciplined. Patrols, sentries, they mean business. Say I go in at night and get the women and children out. Where to next? But I have to get them out. Have to. February 13th. Recon during night. Well organized. Sentries along most approaches. But stream not covered. Are they sick? Lots of coughing fits. Tuberculosis? Women and children still in pen. We'll try to infiltrate by stream tomorrow night. February 14th. They ate them. February 19th. Ambush along Riverside Trail. 6 males killed. Heard their coughing a mile away. Used their grenades to booby-trap bodies. Kept half. Secured 6 SMGs, 500 rounds 10mm, 6 frags. February 20th. Ambush along Riverside Trail. 2 males died checking bodies. Killed 2 more with rifle. Shot 1 through calf and let asshole crawl off to spread message. Coughed like I'd shot him through the lungs. February 23rd. Ambush half-mile east of Coal Pits Wash. 8 males killed. Year 2096, Part 2. February 28th. Ambush in the Narrows. 6 males killed. Took a 10mm through thigh. Steel jacket. Miss femoral. Lucky. Used tourniquet to make sure no blood splattered on rocks back to cave. Have set traps all along entrance passage, but if they find me, it will be a matter of time. Still, 24 confirmed kills in 10 days, at least 1/3 their combat force. Not bad for an old man. March 2nd. Lucky, 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 lucky. Patrol was small, 3 men. Screaming woke me. Point man caught under deadfall. Panic fire ricocheted into the cave, almost hit me. Crawled forward and killed them all with SMGs. Nearly used frags. Stupid. Finger in pen when remembered ricochets. Leaving at once. No other patrols in the area, but they'll be searching Narrows for these 3. Taking as much food as I can drag with me and heading to cave south. And as we can see here, Randall Clark came into contact and conflict with the survivors of Vault 22. And it would appear that the survivors of Vault 22 had something wrong with them since they were killing and eating innocent people. It appears that perhaps the infection had taken some kind of grasp or hold on their mind. They were still rational enough to form a team or a group, but it seems like they lost some control over their desires. And I also wanted to point out that west of Caterpillar's Mound is a small camp, and we can assume that this camp used to belong to Vault 22 because there are spore carriers here, and here we can find a pen along with a dead skeleton and a camp, kind of signifying that this was the location where those Mexicans were eaten by the Vault 22 survivors. Also, outside of Half Mouse Cave, we can find a dead body crushed by a rock. This is likely a Vault 22 survivor that was crushed by Randall Clark's deadfall trap. So another pretty cool reference to what Randall Clark did in this canyon. And something that I thought was particularly interesting in this terminal entry is Randall Clark asked, why did these people that came to Zion Valley have 22 on their back? Obviously, anybody familiar with Fallout knows that these are the Vault-Tec jumpsuits, standard issue. And you can obviously see these jumpsuits on Vault Boy and other advertisements, including TV commercials. So to me, it's a little bit strange that Randall Clark didn't know what these numbers were. Perhaps he never watched TV, or he just didn't pay attention much to the outside world. Nonetheless, I think it's pretty interesting. And the next location we will make our way to is Cueva Garachi. This location is a cave located kind of in the middle of the map, and as Randall Clark said, he made his way south after the incident in the Narrows. And here on the minimap, you can see the location of Cueva Garachi. It is just southeast of Ranger Station Osprey. And as always, we will have to be very careful as we make our way through the cave. These caves are often booby-trapped to the teeth. And as we enter, we'll encounter a fork in the road. I decided to go left, which kind of slants down, and then we come to another fork, and I went left again, kind of coming into this large empty chamber that had some spores and spore plants inside of it. After clearing out the enemies, we could continue down our path further into the cave. This long winding corridor led us to a very large central room that had some spore carriers in it. I would have to say, I think the reason some of these later caves have spore carriers and the earlier ones do not is perhaps the Vault 22 survivors were searching these caves for Randall Clark, and they died in the caves, or they became fully infected inside of the caves. That would explain why later caves in the Randall Clark series have spore carriers in them, while the first few caves do not. And then on the second level, we can find these explosive crates with obviously explosives in them and some other junk. There is then a gate that will lead us to a room where we have to be careful of mines. And once again, we can find a room where Randall Clark made his home for a period of time. And once again, this location would be optimal for player housing due to all the storage and the workbenches. And always there's some random loot in this area. Inside of the platform, we have a bed and a survival cache. Again, we can loot and get some pretty good loot. Always very nice to find. There was also a gun case with an average lock, and upon opening it, we could find a plethora of different ammo types, along with some weapons like a flamer and a butter knife, and a sawed-off shotgun. After that, we could go over towards the terminal and to see what happened to Randall Clark during his conflict with the Vault 22 survivors. And it reads, Year 2097, January 13th. The coffers are gone finally. All 34 that still lived ate their dead for strength, then struck out southeast. Victory. 10 months of killing. All I feel is cold. They deserved every goddamn bit of it. January 17th. Thought I was dreaming, but the screams were real. For a moment, thought they tricked me, just pretended to leave Zion. Then sent a patrol to track me down. But the screams were a woman's. Edged around corner and passageway to have a look. One vaulter. Ankle deep in bear trap. Leveled my SMG, but the way she was crying stopped me. How she screamed when she saw me. Been their boogeyman a long time. Named Sylvie. Claims she ran away from them. Calls them evil people, children of the devil. Turns out they were sick after all. Something they caught in a vault they lived in. She never came down with it. Yet. So help me, I wound up being her nurse. January 18th. Her story matches what I learned from my interrogations last year, but according to her, let's just say it was bad to be a woman in that group, so when they left, she slipped away. She knows next to nothing about living outside a vault, says she wants to learn. Year 2100, September 9th. Never been so scared in my life. Canada wasn't scary, just sickening. The criminality of it. The end of the world wasn't scary. When I knew you and Alex were dead, I didn't have anything left to be scared about. I just went on for some reason. I wasn't scared fighting the vaulters. It was like I kept daring them to finish me. When I killed them, I think it was the closest I came to feeling happy in years. Sylvie is pregnant, and I'm terrified. Ridiculous old man. A father again at 47? In this world? She's so excited and so trusting. Says it's God's will that we have this child. Like nothing can go wrong. You see, Shar, she doesn't know about you and Alex. Never told her. Almost did sometimes, but what you and I had, it seemed wrong to share it. More like an old man not wanting his young wife to know how he failed the one who come before her. Hiking into Torqueville for medical books and supplies. This will be done right. I'm sorry, Shar. Hope you can forgive me. Year 2101, March 5th. Baby was breech. Would have been a son. Michael. Did my best to turn him. Failed. Must have done cesarean too late. Had to put Sylvie out and she never woke up. Buried them south of the Narrows. Well, this time I was by their side. So much better. I think I can finally do it. Blow my fucking brains out all over this goddamn cave. And with that, we find even more depressing news about Randall. He was successful in getting rid of the crazed Vault 22 survivors. However, his second attempt at building a family was also met with a similar failure. It's very, very depressing for our friend, and I can only imagine the loneliness and helplessness that he felt, although truly none of it was his fault, which makes it even more devastating. However, as you might have guessed, Randall Clark's journey did not end here. Our next location is Morning Glory Cave. This cave is situated next to the crashed plane in Zion Valley, and there was also some lizards who interrupted my scenic shot. But with that, let's go ahead and check it out. Morning Glory Cave is located just north of Patriarchs Campground, and while accessing this location is pretty easy, I did find that there are a lot of enemies that spawn around here, whether it be like whitelegs or those geckos. Upon entering the cave, we will get a warning from Waking Cloud, as she states that this place is not to be touched and it is forbidden, because it belongs to the father in the cave. And we will soon learn who the father in the cave is. It is also worth noting that every location we visited before this is entirely optional, meaning the player could easily miss all of Randall Clark's story. However, this cave is not optional, and it could be your first encounter with Randall Clark. And the reason you have to go to this cave, it is connected to the quest, the Grand Staircase, and we have to go to this cave in order to fetch the Grand Staircase map holotape in order to continue that quest. And as we make our way further into the cave, we will enter this main central chamber, and there's going to be several spore carriers and spore plants, so make sure to be prepared to fight them. We can actually jump our way to the top here, and there's an ammunition box on the top of this rock in the central chamber, and there's actually some stuff up here. There are some bear traps, along with a table that has an ammunition box and an explosives crate, although there isn't a whole lot of loot inside of those boxes, but I thought it was pretty cool and pretty interesting. And then on the south side of the cave, there is a door that will lead us further into the cave and to Randall Clark's living area. Be careful, because there is a tripwire that is very well hidden towards the top, and there are some shotguns that would shoot you if you tripped it. So definitely be careful. But at this point, if you've been following me or been doing this yourself, you know very well that you must be careful when exploring these places. Behind an average locked door is Randall Clark's living quarters. This room is overgrown with a lot of vegetation, and there's also a table with an egg timer on it, but not a whole lot of other loot. Until we get to the platform, we can find a bedroll and of course the survival cache, and it has various good loot inside of it, along with the Grand Staircase map holotape. So really good, and we can continue the quest. This is the last survival cache that we need to find for that small marked objective. Then we can look at the terminal and see what happened next. Year 2108, August 22nd. 10 sets of tracks, half-mile northeast of Canyon entrance. Barefoot. August 23rd. Saw them through scope. Corpses walking around. Finally gone crazy. Dementia, maybe. August 24th. I'm not crazy. They're real. God damn it, they are real. Rushed me the moment they saw me. Snarling like animals. They look like corpses, but they don't smell rotted. I'll be putting them out of their misery. Doing for them what I could never do for myself. September 3rd, the last of them, all gone. Year 2113, February 5th. Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday, you useless old dinosaur. Happy birthday to me. Happy 60th. What do you get, a man who has everything? A bottle of whiskey and a 12-gauge slug through the roof of the mouth. Woo! Come now. What do I have to do to prove to myself that I've lived long enough? I'm a shriveled old man, white beard, seen enough sunrises and sunsets, saw the big sunset, been hanging on through the long night 36 years now. Ridiculous. Not kidding myself into thinking there's anything on the other side of this. Fine. Things weren't so bad before I was born. Char and Alex, Sylvia and Michael who could have been, thoughts of the beloved dead before dying. Goodbye, Zion. February 6th. Fucking didn't do it. Coward as usual. Maybe 2 bottles next year. Year 2123, April 25th. 24 of them. Half boys, half girls. Youngest is 8, maybe. Oldest 13 to 14. Dirty and scrawny, but on foot a long time. Children's Crusade. Struck camp on nearly the same spot as Los Mexicanos. 30 years and a lifetime ago. I spent 2 nights listening to them. English, literate. One of them reads stories while the little ones fall asleep. They escape someplace they called the school, but can't figure out where it was. When they want a little one to behave, they tell him to stop or the principal will get you. Principal better not show up or I'll blow his goddamn head off. I can still shoot straight. So Randall Clark spent a considerable amount of time in Morning Glory Cave, at least 15 years, and celebrated his 60th and 70th birthday in here, fought some ghouls, and came into contact with some children from a place called the school. On to the next chapter. The next location is Red Gate, which is located northwest of the entrance to Zion Valley, just south of Morning Glory Cave, as you can see here on the Pip-Boy. We'll jump straight into this location, because I found it important to show off this location how I experienced. When I first showed up here, there were 2 Yao Guais, which I immediately shot, and they became Ghost of She. Just kind of replicas and not nearly as cool because I'm sure the flame went away. But those Yao Guais ran away, but I'm sure we'll encounter them later. Then over here we can find a camp of Whitelegs, which is a part of the quest, the Advanced Scout. So we have to take out these Whitelegs, so I went ahead and decided to kill all of them. The battle that ensued was for the most part pretty easy. Using the anti-materia rifle was pretty easy. Then there is a Whitelegs War Totem, and you can actually take these totems to force the Whitelegs to leave and not fight, so there is a pacifist approach to this quest, if the player so chooses. Inside this camp, there really isn't a whole lot. We have some campfire sacks with some pretty minor loot. As I went around to the northwest, I found the Yao Guai, and took him out with the help of Walking Cloud. But these Yao Guais were actually pretty difficult to fight, and I found them to be more difficult than the Whitelegs themselves. Then as we made our way to the north, we found another Whiteleg camp, again a part of the quest, the Advanced Scout. So we have to take out the Whitelegs pretty easy. I don't even think I took any damage because the Whitelegs only targeted Walking Cloud, making my life very easy. After that, we have to find a way to get to the top of the Red Gate. I kind of went around the mountain to see what I could find, and as I was going around the mountain, I encountered this second Yao Guai from earlier. However, this fight was pretty easy using the riot shotgun and the damage I dealt earlier to this Yao Guai. The riot shotgun is so overpowered. Then on the western side of Red Rock, I finally found a little slope up, and I could easily make my way to the top, where we discovered the body of Randall Dean Clark. At this site, we can see that Randall Clark finally met his end. We chased him around all of Zion Valley, followed his story, followed his triumphs, followed his despair, and it ended up here. And if we search the body, we can find out more about Randall's last days. Upon looting the duffel bag next to the skeleton, we can find a lot of loot and a holotape titled Year 2124. Randall Clark would have been approaching 71 years old when he wrote this holotape, but he fell about a month short of reaching 71, still a very old age in the nuclear apocalypse. We make our way to the nearby mountain to try and imagine what Randall saw in his last moments, and the holotape reads, Year 2124, January 2nd. I've been leaving notes for them and gifts. They liked the books, started with stories but moved on to weapon manuals, medical books, practical stuff. In the notes, well, it's embarrassing. Almost like those cards people used to give to each other, everything sweet and loving. I tell them to read and to learn and to make the most of their new home. I tell them that I'm giving them Zion as a gift to make up for all of the sorrows of their lives so far, and all the sorrows man has visited on man. I tell them to be kind to each other and modest. I tell them never to hurt each other, but that if someone else comes along and tries to hurt them, to strike back with righteous anger. Stuff like that. I sign every note, the Father, because, well, just because. January 18th. Have I mentioned that I'm dying? Mine's still sharp. Lungs are the problem. Might be cancer. Cough's been getting worse for months. Finally, there's blood in it. Getting harder to visit my little friends. Breath so short. I've given away most of what I own. They'll find the rest in the caves when they get a little older. I don't want them to find me, though. The father is a broken-down old man. Disappointment. It's time. I don't want another birthday. January 23rd. It's cold enough that I won't last long in the high mound up next to Red Gate. I think I've got enough breath left in me to make it. I'll just lie down and stare at the sky. Feels right. I hope they'll do well. I hope no harm comes to them, from within or without. Did my best to prepare them with the last few notes. Said something kind about each one of them, what makes each one special. Told them the Father was pleased by their kind natures, and that it would be up to them to handle things on their own from now on. That I'll be silent, but still watching and still caring. Lying then. Oh yes. Lied to you, Shar, and Alex, and Sylvie. Told you I'd be with you forever, but I wouldn't go back and unsay it once if I could. What was the point of it all? So many failures. But I never forgot your face, or Little Nut's, or, Sylvie's. They used to say that happened after a while, but it never did for me. Maybe the only point of all of this lying was to keep those pictures in my head going for as long as I could. It was the only life I could give you. Not a day went by without. It wasn't choice. I chose to die again and again, just never did. Body had its own drive. Well, the little ones will need it. Species will need it if it's to continue. That blind drive onward. I wish them well. It's been a gift to me, at the end of it all, to behold innocence. Goodbye, Zion. Randall Dean Clark. February 5th, 2053 to January 23rd, 2124. And if you haven't made the connection by now, the tribe, the Sorrows, are descendants of the children that Randall Clark helped. And the reason the Sorrows refer to the father is not out of God, but instead they were referring to their god of Randall Clark. For all of those children who wandered into Zion Valley oh so long ago, Randall Clark was their father. He was their god. Not only did he give them supplies and give them aid, but he also gave them lessons in morality, and he influenced their culture and their lifestyle to this day. And there we have it, the full story of Randall Dean Clark. Now, of course, in the Unexplored Mojave, we try to visit locations that might be easily missed or overlooked by players. We visited several locations over the course of this video, and I hope you guys enjoyed. But the larger picture of this video was that in the Fallout universe, we're talking about nuclear war. So many people died, and it's easy to overlook that kind of destruction on a real human level. What I love so much about Randall Dean Clark is it shows that destruction on a level which we can grasp. We can see how terrible war is, and we can see how terrible the fate of the world in such a situation is. This was a very special episode of the Unexplored Mojave, and if you guys stayed tuned for this long, I just want to say I sincerely appreciate it, and I had a lot of fun making this project. Huge shout out to Vicious Idiot, MEP8231, and Weber Wilson 6092 for giving me a lot of these locations as recommendations, and this video would not be possible without people like you. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any recommendations for the next location, please post them in the comment section below. And, as always, until next time. Hello everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome back to the Unexplored Mojave. Today we're going to be looking at Red Rapids Docks. This is a location just south of Red Gate, which we visited in our Randall Clark video. So let's check out this pretty small location. And here you can see the location on the Pip-Boy on the southwestern part of the map, just south of the Red Gate, as I said before. Now, as you approach Red Rapids docks, you might be attacked by some Yao Guai like I was. There's always a chance for some wild enemies to spawn around here, Yao Guai or Cazadors, and your occasional white legs. Now, actually, on the dock, there isn't a whole lot of loot. It's just a boat and a dock, and then a sunken boat below the dock. Inside of this boat, we have a metal box, but just some junk inside and then some purified water. Not bad, maybe if you're in hardcore mode. And here's the sunken boat. Now, on the other side, there is a Soros mural. You can see it on the left part of the screen just there. And then some geckos, green geckos, just wandering around. If you have any kind of scoped weapon, it just provides you with some target practice. Then on the other side of the river, there really isn't anything over here. There's some rock flowers, the dead geckos, and then the mural I mentioned from earlier. So that could pretty much sum up the entire video, but I wanted to go ahead and explore upriver a bit to see what we could find. Here the river kind of dips down, and you can see some fish. Then this pathway leads to the Three Marys. That will obviously not be covered in this video, but a different video. And then if we follow the river further back, it just takes us towards the entrance where we first enter Zion Valley. Just now we're on the below part, but you can see the wooden bridge above us. And there you guys have it, Red Rapids Docks. A pretty small location in Zion Valley, but I found it pretty good, and as always, it is very scenic. Okay guys, thank you so much for watching. If you have any recommendations or ideas for the Unexplored Mojave, please post them in the comments section below. And, as always, until next time. Hello everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome back to the Unexplored Mojave. Today we're going to be checking out 3 locations scattered around Zion Valley. Those locations being Court Fork Overlook, the Bend Bridge, and Daggers Point. These 3 locations are kind of close to one another, so I decided to go ahead and put them all in one video, so let's check them out. So the first location is Court Fork Overlook. This is just south of Patriarchs Campground, and it's just a kind of small mound that gives you an overlook of the surrounding area. On top, we can find a small toilet, so this is probably used as a campsite long ago. And then we can come to the overlook itself, and you can get some somewhat decent views of the surrounding area. Behind this scenic overlook sign, we can find a hollowed out rock, which usually contains some pretty minor loot. But besides that, there's not a whole lot at this location. However, this location is based on the real world Court of the Patriarchs, which also includes Patriarchs Campground. These 2 locations are kind of a combination that are based on the real world Court of the Patriarchs in Zion National Park. Now, while I was here, I got attacked by some white legs, as you can see, but with the anti-materia rifle and high ground, killing them was pretty easy. The next location is the Bend Bridge. Now, this is also based on a real-world location, mainly Big Bend Cable Creek Bridge. However, I could not find a picture of this bridge on the internet. I could only confirm that it does exist. I think it's just a kind of small hiking trail bridge, but in the Fallout universe, it appears that the bridge has been given some upgrades, and it can now carry cars. And the bridge has gone through a rough state. Also, there was a gecko kind of just watching me cross the bridge. But the bridge collapsed, kind of the southern middle section collapsed, and we can see there's a car here, along with a dead body on the bottom. I don't know if this was just deterioration or if it collapsed at the time of the Great War. Also in the river, there are several bottles and just some junk on the platform. And like I said, a dead skeleton. I mean, of course the skeleton is dead, I hope. Next is Daggers Point. Now this location can be a little bit glitchy in that sometimes it doesn't appear on the compass. Right on your compass, it tells you when you are near a location, undiscovered or discovered. And for me, at least, initially, Daggers Point was not showing up. But Daggers Point is just this little part that kind of jets out into the Virgin River. Now, of interest here is a skeleton and some mantises, but a skeleton with a duffel bag next to it. And inside the duffel bag is a Vault 22 jumpsuit. And here is the skeleton. And so we can assume that this vault dweller died perhaps at the hands of Randall Clark. Of course, we don't really know, but we do know Randall Clark really created horror for all of the vault dwellers in Zion. And before we go, this whole area is kind of based on the Big Bend in Zion National Park. The Big Bend is just an area where the Virgin River takes a big bend or a big turn. Who would have guessed? Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any recommendations for future locations in the Unexplored Mojave, please post them in the comments section below. And as always, until next time. Hello everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome back to the Unexplored Mojave. Today we're going to be checking out Ranger Substation Eagle. This is the last of the substations scattered around Zion Valley that we have visited. Now we're also going to be checking out Bighorn Bluff. This is a marked location that is pretty much right next to Ranger Substation Eagle. So without further ado, let's jump into it. And here you can see Ranger Substation Eagle and Bighorn Bluff on the Pip-Boy, just northwest, kind of west of the Red Gate. Also, there's this little canyon behind Ranger Substation Eagle that is unmarked, and we will check it out. As I approached, there were some vicious dogs, and then a Yao Guai, and then just all chaos really broke loose as I was making my approach to Ranger Substation Eagle. There was a mole rat, there was a Yao Guai, then there were Cazadors that killed this freaking dog. They stung me, and just all chaos really ensued. The Cazadors also managed to take out Waking Cloud, and it was just absolute chaos. Also, my riot shotgun, after playing through this DLC for so long, is nearing its end. And then here is Waking Cloud being incredibly lazy after fighting a Yao Guai and Cazadors. You know, unacceptable. So, you know, we'll have to deal with that later. But anyways, after that pretty fun fight, I made my way up to Ranger Substation Eagle. And it sits on the top of this little hill. Now at the top I found more Yao Guai, but they were no match for my riot shotgun. Then inside the substation there is this Fallout truck, very common around Fallout New Vegas. There's also a lot of crates inside this garage with ammunition, bottle caps, and pre-war money. Definitely worth taking a look through here because I actually found a good amount of ammo, so you might want to take a peek. On top, it's just like all the other Ranger substations. In this first aid kit, I found 10 stim packs, which is quite good if I do say so myself. There's also these sacks, but they don't really have a whole lot in them, and then a very hard locked locker. However, there wasn't anything in it besides a hunting rifle and a few rounds of ammunition. And that's all for Ranger Substation Eagle. Then to the south of Eagle, you will see these tents if you have started the quest, Deliverer of Sorrows. If you have not started this quest, there will be no white legs here. This is a white leg camp. Instead, it might be inhabited by some geckos. So let's check that out along with the canyon. And as we head to the back of this canyon, we will find a hollowed out rock. However, there's nothing else back here, and hollowed out rocks are kind of a crapshoot. I got 30 caps, a gecko steak, and some pre-war money. Really not that bad compared to some other hollowed out rocks that I've looted. Then in Bighorn Bluff, this is a White Legs camp. It is a part of the quest, Deliverer of Sorrows. But like I said, the camp itself only spawns upon starting the quest. And there was no enemies here because I've already killed them in my previous video about Randall Clark. Then you can actually climb on top of these rocks. I found a hollowed out log along with several of these small like mountains or hills or viewing areas. But there's really not a whole lot up here besides some immaculate views of Zion Valley. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Unexplored Mojave. If you have any recommendations for the next location, as always, please post them in the comments section below. And until next time. Hello everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome back to the Unexplored Mojave. Today we're going to be taking a look at a few locations. Our main location today is Yao Guai Cave, but we will also be taking a look at the East Fork Bridge, which is the bridge directly in front of you right now, and we'll also be looking at the Pine Creek Tunnel. So let's jump into it. So all of these locations are in the eastern part of the map. Here you can see the location of all three. As we cross East Fork Bridge, we can see that it's in disrepair, and that this bridge has a very long fall to the river below us. So we definitely don't want to just jump off like we have with other bridges. As we cross the first bridge, there's two bridges, we will immediately find Yao Guai Cave. Now, this location is a part of the quest River Monsters, where you have to come and kill several Yao Guai, and as an optional objective, you can put some explosives in the cave and detonate them, collapsing the cave, rendering it useless to any Yao Guai. As we enter the cave, we will find that it has several corridors and that it's very twisting and turning. Up on this high part, we can find two skeletons, and as we make our way down, we can find a really cool window that gives us a sight into the main lair of the Yao Guai that are inside this cave, and then we can hear them shouting as we walk away. As we go further in, I found these batch of eggs. However, I don't know what kind of eggs they are. They seem to be like Cazador eggs, maybe, or maybe Yao Guai, but it doesn't seem like Yao Guai would lay eggs because they're like bears, right? Then, as we make our way further into the cave, we have a small river, and then what I thought was an exit, but this is actually not an exit, it's a trick, and I'll explain it later. We can find some of the locations where we can put our explosives, and after that, we actually don't have to fight the Yao Guai, so we can just leave the cave, but this is the Unexplored Mojave, so we have to go see what this main lair looks like. There were 3 Yao Guai inside of this lair. Using the anti-material rifle, we were able to very easily deal with the Yao Guai. No problem. Inside this main lair is just a large central chamber that the Yao Guai obviously use as their, den. And there isn't anything in here, unfortunately, no loot, just kind of a cool-looking cave. And then heading back, I thought this was an exit because it has that same kind of light and glow. However, it's kind of like a trick. So I wonder if they put it here if players tried to fight the Yao Guai and then they tried to run away and got stuck. But anyways, we have to go all the way back through the cave, as you saw, which is a very long walk. And then once outside, we can also detonate the cave, which will finish the quest. And we don't actually have to fight any of the other Yao Guai that were listed on the quest before. But if we keep making our way down this canyon, we can still find those Yao Guai, and we can choose to kill them, as you see here. And here I was using the survivalist rifle, and while it's not as good as the anti-material rifle, it's still pretty efficient at killing. And we were able to take out all the Yao Guai. I took no damage, but Waking Cloud took some damage, so thank you very much, Waking Cloud, for being my bullet monkey. And then as we continue to make our way down the canyon, I found out that you can't really go on top of any of these hills, which I thought was really unfortunate. I even tried reload dashing, but to no avail. I was just trying to get some cool views of the surrounding area. Then as we come to the end here, we will find Pine Creek Tunnel. However, there's nothing in this tunnel besides that hollowed out log in front of it. This tunnel is inaccessible, and it's just kind of a fast travel point in the far eastern part of the map. Below the tunnel, we have this little pond area, and there's Datura root on that small little island. This pond is separate from the rest of the Virgin River, and I just thought it was an interesting little random area. Why is it there? I don't know, but it's just kind of really cute, really random, and I thought it was a little bit unexplored. Now, I also wanted to mention that Pine Creek Tunnel is based on the real-world Zion Mount Countermile Tunnel. This is a very cool-looking tunnel located near Zion National Park, also along Utah State Route 9. So you can obviously see the developers took a lot of inspiration from real life. However, the tunnel in real life looks far cooler than the tunnel in Fallout New Vegas. This tunnel is important for accessing Zion National Park, and it is very historic. The tunnel was built in 1919, so it's well over 100 years old now. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this episode of the Unexplored Mojave. If you have any recommendations for future locations, please post them in the comments section below, and as always, until next time. Howdy, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Unexplored Mojave. Today we're going to be checking out the Virgin River. Now, this is kind of a weird video to make because the Virgin River is actually a very large feature of Honest Hearts in Zion Valley. And while the Virgin River is spread across all of Zion Valley, it does have a specific location on the Pip-Boy, kind of when two parts of the river reconverge from around an island. Now, I thought I would go ahead and make this video showcasing that location, the actual Virgin River location, but also showing off some other unmarked locations located along the banks of the Virgin River. So, let's jump into it. So, as I said before, the Virgin River is this large river that is all over Zion Valley. Now, this river makes it really easy to navigate Zion Valley, kind of creating this large middle section with several side sections. It was very helpful when finding locations for this part of my series. Now, at the actual Virgin River location, which is towards the beginning of the map, there is a sunken boat. At the bottom of the boat, you can find a skeleton, a first aid box with random chems in it, and a toolbox with other random loot in it. Also next to the skeleton is a combat knife, which is pretty good. When I was trying to leave the sunken boat, I had a bit of trouble getting out. This kind of was just jumping around, just trying to get out, and after a little bit of frustration, I was finally able to escape. I probably could have fast traveled, but I wanted to make sure I could get out of the boat, and yes, I could. But for that location, that's pretty much it. Just a sunken boat and a fast travel point on the map. Now, along the rest of the Virgin River, I encountered several enemies, especially whitelegs, who found ways to continuously attack me. But using my anti-material rifle, I was able to deal with them pretty easily from a distance. I think whitelegs are actually pretty darn tough. They have a lot of health, and sometimes they have really good weapons. Now, if you come over to this area next to the crashed airplane, I just found this kind of interesting cliff that you can actually climb up to. However, this cliff has no real purpose. I just thought it was interesting that this cliff is here on the edge of the world, and there's nothing here. Maybe it had larger intentions, maybe it's just, no thought was thrown into it. Now, a lot of this is also just swimming. Lots of fish, lots of water. And then near Windfall Docks is a small island with just a random rock and some honey mesquite on it. No real reason to throw it in here besides I forgot to mention this small island during my Fish Lodge video. Then if we move further up in the northeast corner of the Virgin River, we can find a hollowed out rock kind of near Clearwater Docks. Just in the far northeast corner, and not really much else. And I did find this really weird area where the texture is very low res and kind of just glitching out for whatever reason. Just thought I'd point it out just west of Clearwater Docks. And like I said though, a lot of the Virgin River, as I was exploring it, was just swimming and swimming. And then as I approached Cueva Gurachi, which is a cave that I talked about in my Randall Clark video, I wanted to show an incident from a previous video. And then I also found these dead horses doing God knows what. They were just kind of running around in the river, and then one of them started like frickin' flying around, going up the cliff, and eventually I saw one of them go all the way to the top of the cliff over here, and he seemed to place something or take something from the edge of the cliff. Don't know what was happening, but I'm glad I experienced it. However, that location, I feel, is a location for another time. So when I made that video, I incorrectly thought that that cliff or that incident was related to Cueva Gurachi. However, it is not. So I just decided I'd put it in this video because I didn't know where else to put it. And I wanted to ask you guys if you had any information on what is happening here. When I returned, I found more dead horses freaking out near this location, trying to climb the mountain. And I'm just really confused about what was happening, and I made my way to the top of this cliff. And at the top of the cliff here, you have this like bit of the mountain which jets out, and at the top there is a skeleton. And then I could throw the skeleton off, but I couldn't find anything up here. And in my previous video, the dead horses picked up or dropped off something at this location. I now assume that the dead horses were picking up something, but I don't know for sure, and I really couldn't find anything on the internet. Here's the location of the cliff just east of Ranger Station Osprey and northeast of Cueva Garachi. If you guys have any information about this location or why the dead horses in my game are freaking out near this location, please let me know in the comments section below. Alright everyone, thank you so much for watching this edition of the Unexplored Mojave. If you have any recommendations for a future location, please post them in the comments section below. And, as always, until next time. Hello everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome back to the Unexplored Mojave. Today we're going to be taking a look at burial mounds. This is a location in the eastern part of Zion Valley. Now, this location is kind of in the center of the map, and it can change depending on the quest. If you choose to help the Sorrows evacuate from Zion Valley, starting the quest, Flight from Zion, the location will change a bit. You'll have these kind of wooden platforms in the back, as you can see now, and there will be a lot of white legs here. So let's dive into this location. And here you can see the location of burial mounds on the map just east of Zion Fishing Lodge. Now, as I said, if you start the quest Flight from Zion, then this location will be changed because you have an optional quest to complete here called Sanctity of the Dead. During this quest, we need to help the Sorrows in this area escape from the White Legs. After talking to Daniel to start the quest, we can then head on over to Burial Mounds, as you can see here on the minimap. However, you cannot fast travel anymore, so I had to walk the entire way over here. Upon arriving at the camp, like I said, there's going to be a ton of White Legs, so I decided to use explosive rounds and try and sneak up on them, because White Legs are tough as nails. And even this guy taking some explosives to the frickin' face still took like 4 or 5 bullets to kill. So definitely be prepared for a pretty difficult fight if you come here. Now there will be Sorrows here as well, and they can fight with you or you can tell them to stand back. They fought with me, but do be aware that if Dancing Flame dies, the quest will be failed. After killing all of the White Legs, you will finish the quest, Sanctity of the Dead. However, there were still some White Legs attacking me. I think these White Legs were unrelated, and they just came over because they heard the fighting, maybe. But at this location, we just have some burial mounds. It is what you would think it is. There are some urns in this area, and if you actually bring Waking Cloud here, which you would have to do before starting Flight from Zion, then she will comment that you shouldn't disturb the urns because it is her people, but you can still loot the urns without losing karma or without pissing off Waking Cloud. So some interesting and kind of funny commentary that carries no weight, and in the back we can see this mural of people, maybe like ghosts or something, I don't know, it looks kind of creepy though, I think. And then we have all of this wooden scaffolding because we started the quest, Sanctity of the Dead. Then if we go over to the western part of this like little valley, we can climb up to the top of this cliff, and then there's a hollowed out rock, which actually had a decent amount of caps inside of it. And that is all for Burial Mounds. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any recommendations for the next location, please drop them in the comments section below. And, as always, until next time.
By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. Yea, we wept, when we remembered Zion. Remember, O Lord, the children of Edom in the day of Jerusalem, who said, raise it even to the foundation. O daughter of Babylon, who ought to be destroyed, happy shall he be that rewardeth thee as thou hast served us. Happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stones. Given those two choices, yes. In the best of all possible worlds, they would just leave us in peace. But they won't. I don't enjoy killing, but when done righteously, it's just a chore, like any other. Practiced hands make for short work, and the good Lord knows there's much to be done here. I and the dead horses are prepared to do what must be done to protect Zion from the Whitelegs. And though Daniel won't accept it yet, there are many sorrows who are also prepared. They may not be warriors, but this is their home. If you have a chance to speak with Daniel about this, ask him to consider defending Zion instead of abandoning it.
I appreciate it. Well, that's it. This is all we need. Now all that's left is to quietly pack up and try to get out of here without being noticed. That's assuming that Joshua won't try to stop me. And that he hasn't talked you into fighting the Whitelegs despite what I've said. Don't worry, I don't hold it against you. You're an outsider. Fighting seems like the practical solution. I'll tell you again. There's more at stake. No. Why? Why? Haven't you seen enough of what's going on here to see that the Sorrows don't need to butcher the Whitelegs for a piece of land? What Joshua wants is more than an attack. He wants a slaughter. And he needs more than you and the dead horses to do it. The Sorrows can't be pushed into this. You and Joshua don't have the right to force them into it. Please, consider what I'm saying. I've already explained to them that we're leaving. They've accepted it. What is Joshua going to tell them about being a warrior? What are you going to tell them about how to live with themselves after they got lost in the moment, killed someone who didn't deserve to die? Or does that not matter? Is that just an acceptable consequence if it means holding on to this valley? Maybe there is no place left in this world for mercy. But even if it tramples me into the dust, I will never accept it. And I will never condone it.
Thank you for this. I know Daniel doesn't approve, but destroying the Whitelegs is the only way to ensure the Sorrows can remain in Zion. You and I will lead a group of Dead Horse warriors and Sorrows hunters into 3 Marys from this position. Our objective is to find the Whitelegs' leader, salt upon wounds, and prevent him from fleeing. Show no quarter to the Whitelegs we come across. Make no mistake about why we are here. This is an extermination. God be with you.
And with that, our war against the Whitelegs has reached its peak. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Unexplored Mojave. Today we're going to be covering 3 Marys. This location becomes central to the plot of the game if you choose to make the Sorrows fight the Whitelegs. The other option is to side with Daniel and to help the Sorrows evacuate from Zion Valley. For the sake of this series and my own personal preference, I decided to side with Joshua Graham and to have the Sorrows stay and fight. And with that, we have to begin our trek across Zion Valley with Joshua Graham to 3 Marys. Now, a real quick note, 3 Marys is a real-world location. It's based on the real-world 3 Marys, a rock formation within Zion National Park. As we make our way to 3 Marys, we will find various Whitelegs throughout Zion Valley that we will have to fight and kill, but with Joshua Graham at our side, it's actually a lot easier than it has been before. Joshua Graham is a very overpowered companion, and it's a big shame that you can't have him follow you to the Mojave, or you can't have him for longer during this DLC. I actually found out there were some Whitelegs by the body of Randall Clark, so I killed him and decided to pay Randall Clark one last visit before we end this DLC. And I looked inside Randall Clark's bag one more time, and I found some scotch, and I decided to go ahead and take this scotch and to take a sip out of respect for our friend Randall Clark. His story is truly incredible and makes Honest Hearts just an incredible DLC, in my opinion. So, here's one for Randall Clark. Now, here on the Pip-Boy, you can see the location of 3 Marys. Now, this is just a long canyon with a river running through it, and it's actually quite near the beginning of the game. However, 3 Marys Cave is not a discoverable location yet, and the very back of the canyon is not accessible until we start the quest. As we begin to make our way through the winding canyon, the rain will slowly begin to stop, setting the scene for a truly epic battle between the dead horses, Sorrows, and the Whitelegs. Now, this battle can be a bit difficult. I actually died during the very final battle because it was more difficult than I anticipated. So definitely make sure you're ready with ammunition, weapons, and some healing items. But the very beginning of Three Marys I actually found to be quite easy, because not only do you have Joshua Graham at your side, but you also have various Sorrows and dead horses at your side as well, making these encounters at the very beginning very easy, because usually the Whitelegs are distracted by other NPCs and they don't even attack you. So I didn't lose any health during the first part of this battle. Now obviously you want to loot and get whatever ammunition you can get. There were some ammunition crates and some minor loot along my journey through this winding canyon. However, I didn't find anything of major significance that was really worth pointing out. Just be on the lookout for small loot as you make your way through the canyon. After you pass through this small arch, there will be an explosion, and the canyon will become blocked by rocks. From here, Joshua Graham will separate from you, and you're pretty much on your own now for a large portion of this final battle, making it more difficult. Joshua Graham will go around the collapsed rock. Meanwhile, the player has to go through Three Marys Cave. We just walk across this rock bridge, and then we can find Three Marys Cavern, and here it is on the minimap. As we enter the cavern, there will be 3 Whitelegs inside, and these Whitelegs have a lot of health. I was trying to use the survivalist rifle, and it was somewhat challenging to kill them off quickly, and they could deal a decent amount of health. In this cave alone, I lost about half of my health, and keep in mind, I have pretty good armor, and I'm a level 50. So if I was a lower level, I do think this would be a significant challenge, but I've already reached the end game as far as my player progression is concerned. After killing off all of the Whitelegs inside the cavern, you can kind of loot around. There is some decent loot inside, mainly in this medical box. I found some stim packs, which was a very welcome gift. Also up here, there are some ammunition crates along with a footlocker and an explosives crate, so you might as well see what's inside. However, as I mentioned earlier, I never found anything of major significance, but I just found really small items that were kind of worth looting. As we exit Three Marys Cave, you come out to the other side of the collapsed rock, and this area has some things of interest. Now, throughout Three Marys, there's all kinds of junk and litter all about, which is unlike the rest of Zion Valley, kind of demonstrating the carelessness of the Whitelegs. If we make our way to the top of the cliff here, we can find a tripwire along with a small camp. Now, there's no clear indication of who ever owned this camp. However, it does have some similarities to some of the camps we find with Randall Clark because of the traps. And then there was a grenade bouquet that actually fell, and it almost killed me because I triggered the pressure plate. Down below, there is another camp, this one obviously belonging to the Whitelegs. I went down to see if I could find any loot, but I didn't find anything of interest, just a bunch of junk. As I made my way further through the canyon, I was actually kind of surprised that it was a rather peaceful stroll. Just another abandoned Whitelegs camp. Here I found hangers. I was really shocked because I never really noticed like a clothes hanger in Fallout before, but here were some. I don't know what purpose they were being used for, perhaps just hanging up clothes. But from the top of this camp, you got some very beautiful views of the night sky and the canyon. Eventually, though, I did run into some more Whitelegs, and I thought I had a height advantage, you know, high ground and all of that. However, my skills are not the same as Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I was lit on fire by some really amazing throws from this Whiteleg. Seriously, he was throwing some serious dimes, freaking Patrick Mahomes over here. Continuing our way through the canyon, there will be a lot of Whitelegs, but after a short while, we will meet up again with some Sorrows and dead horses. And we can see the dead horses here are burning the bodies. Also, while you make your way through here, you will see various executions being performed by the dead horses. Up on this cliff, there's this really weird, like, small crevice in this kind of random space. Don't know why it's there, what purpose it would ever serve, but I just thought I'd point it out because this is the Unexplored Mojave. Then there is the final push of white legs, and these white legs were actually pretty easy to deal with because I had my sorrow and dead horse friends. As they pushed my friends, I just kind of came from behind and a flank, and taking them out was pretty easy, but I almost committed friendly fire, which would have been big sad. Thankfully, I did not. And after killing the white horses here, we can make our way to the back of the canyon, where we can find that Joshua Graham has already beaten us to the punch. And as I mentioned earlier, I actually died during this final fight. You don't actually have to fight it out, you can execute them, but I thought it'd be more fun to fight.
We warned you at Syracuse, and you persisted. You took advantage of us at New Canaan to drive us out. And like the dogs of Caesar you are, you followed us to Zion. And now you stand on holy ground, a temple to God's glory on earth. The only use for an animal in our temple is sacrifice. Kale wachane conserva o. You understand me, don't you? Don't you?
Outman. Kunaman mad. He killed all white legs. You talk. You stop. You can no need.
The first time I did this fight, I didn't really realize that the other white horses would come up. One of them is equipped with an anti-material rifle, and that deals a ton of damage. I tried using the survivalist rifle, however, it just was too ineffective, and I switched to the riot shotgun, an absolute beast of a weapon. And with that, I was able to eventually take out Salt Upon Wounds. However, this dude has a lot of health, kind of a bullet monkey, but I was finally able to kill him, ending the DLC.
Same end he would have met if he had died on his knees. But I suppose this was for the sake of the dead horses and sorrows. Still, thanks to your help and the grace of God, the Whitelegs won't be troubling Zion anymore. Let's go find Daniel. Tomorrow we'll be here soon enough, and there is much to do.
And I'll put the ending slides for this DLC at the end of the video, so if you guys want to see what happened in my playthrough, you can check it out there. Upon finishing the main quest, we will spawn just outside the southern entrance, and there will be a footlocker with all kinds of goodies inside of it. Definitely make sure to take all of these goodies back with you to the Mojave, as you can really pimp out your character upon your return to New Vegas. Alright guys, I think that concludes our journey in Zion Valley. I had a lot of fun covering Honest Hearts and making this section of the Unexplored Mojave. There's only one more DLC to cover in Fallout New Vegas, and we will definitely get there, but there are still a lot of things that I would like to cover in the main New Vegas area, so we will definitely be getting to those places as well. And once you are ready, we just simply go through the Northern Passage Cave, and we can return to New Vegas. I have to say, I was actually quite happy to be back to New Vegas. It really kind of does feel like home, and seeing the Lucky 38 again definitely gave me a warm feeling. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this episode of the Unexplored Mojave. If you have any recommendations for the next video, please post them in the comments section below. And, as always, until next time.
And so it was that the conflict between the New Canaanites and the Whitelegs was finally resolved. The courier's involvement had tipped the scale, shifting the fragile balance of power.
Despite their defeat at Three Marys and the death of their war chief, the Whitelegs were determined to pursue the other New Canaanites. But when they finally tracked down their prey in Colorado, they discovered the tables had been turned. The Whitelegs who survived the New Canaanites' ambushes were hunted down by dead horses before they could reach the safety of the Great Salt Lake. When word of the Whiteleg's diminished numbers reached the 80s tribe, war was declared. And by year's end, the Whitelegs had been wiped out.
The Sorrows fought beside Joshua Graham and the dead horses, eradicating the threat the Whitelegs posed to Zion. When the courier and Joshua Graham felled Salt upon Wounds, their victory was celebrated with a great feast. The Sorrows' transformation from a peaceful, timid tribe into a proud and warlike people broke Daniel's heart. He tried to take solace in the knowledge that they would remain in Zion, but it was a small comfort. The Sorrows' innocence was lost.
Having helped eradicate the Whitelegs from Zion, the dead horses returned to Dead Horse Point in triumph. They remained neutral toward the Sorrows, but as years went on, there were periods of competitive friction, even violence between the tribes. The new Canaanites, Daniel especially, intervened regularly as mediators, but found it difficult to reconcile the tribes' conflicts.
The defeat of the Whitelegs in Zion marked a turning point in the fortunes of the Happy Trails Caravan Company. Every 2 months, the caravan met with the new Canaanites in Zion Valley to trade. Happy Trails soon returned to prosperity. The vigilance of the Sorrows and dead horses in defending southwestern Utah, initially startling to Happy Trails caravans, soon proved a blessing. The tribes united against the 80s, driving them back from Highway 50, and thus opening yet another trading route for Happy Trails caravans.
Though the courier had stopped Joshua Graham from executing Salt upon Wounds, the war chief still fell in battle. The Whitelegs defeated at Three Marys. Joshua led the Sorrows and dead horses in tending to their comrades and burning the corpses of their foes. He continued to advocate militant opposition to the enemies of New Canaan, and showed little quarter to those he fought. And yet he was changed. He no longer reveled in the brutality and cruelty for which he had been known in his former life. His inner demons, if not extinguished, were at the least appeased.
For years after the defeat of the Whitelegs, Daniel did his best to minister to the Sorrows' spiritual needs. Try as he might, he could not hold back the tribe's increasing militancy and reverence of Joshua Graham. Demoralized, he returned to his family and Dead Horse Point. His failures haunted him for the rest of his days.
And with that, the courier walked out of the history of the tribes of Zion and back to the gathering storm of the Mojave wasteland.
Howdy everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome back to the Unexplored Mojave. Today we're going to be checking out the Mesquite Mountains Lean-To. This is an unmarked location in Fallout New Vegas, just east of the Mesquite Mountain crater. Now, I've actually covered the Mesquite Mountains in a previous video. I talked about the campground and the crater. However, I missed this unmarked location. I found this location to be pretty freaking cool. So, let's check it out. So as I mentioned earlier, it's just east of the Mesquite Mountains crater, and it's southwest of Primm in the California Sunset Drive-In. Now, as you approach this location, you will see some smoke on the horizon as you make your way up this mountain, and there will also be several ghouls in this area, mainly because the crater is highly irradiated. If you didn't know, the Mesquite Mountain crater is one of the few locations of nuclear detonation in the Mojave Wasteland. Of course, Mr. House destroyed most of the nuclear bombs that were headed towards New Vegas, but he didn't get all of them. Now, the lean-to is just a small little hole in the cliffside with some aluminum sheets over the top to make a roof. Inside of it, we can find Programmer's Digest along with a lot of ruined books and a motorcycle that is on fire. Be very careful of the traffic cone because there is a frag mine inside of it, and we don't want to detonate that. Then there's also a hockey mask and a Sunset Sarsaparilla Star bottle cap. So not half bad loot, and we also have a first aid box with some stim packs inside of it. Also on top of the motorcycle we have a copy of Fixing Things, so also pretty good to get some skill magazines. And then on top of the lean-to we can find an antenna Who knows who lived here or what purpose they were using it for, but obviously they were probably tuning in to some kind of radio broadcast. But besides that, that's pretty much the location. Now, it is worth noting that the frag mine that is hidden underneath the cone can be detonated by the coyotes that sometimes spawn in this area. Also, I couldn't find any confirmation of this, but I'm sure it's possible to also get a ghoul to detonate the frag mine as well. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this episode of the Unexplored Mojave. If you have any recommendations for a future location, please post them in the comments section below. And as always, until next time. Hello everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome back to the Unexplored Mojave. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Devil's Throat Cavern. However, this is actually two caverns that are right next to each other, an unmarked location just south of the Devil's Throat. And I've actually covered the Devil's Throat in a previous video. This is a location in the far northeast of the Mojave Wasteland. And here we can just find some centaurs and super mutants, and this location is actually based on the real world's Devil's Throat in Gold Butte National Monument. Now here you can see the location of the caverns, like I said, just south of the Devil's Throat. Now in this area you will find a lot of feral ghouls. Obviously they were probably made radioactive from all of the nuclear waste within the Devil's Throat. Now the Devil's Throat is not a site of nuclear detonation, despite what some people might think. It's actually just a nuclear waste disposal site, and it shows kind of the disregard that the American government had for the environment in the Fallout universe. But the caves themselves aren't really that much. They're just two small caverns with nothing inside of them, and they're just surrounded by a lot of feral ghouls. If we head a bit to the east, we can find the second cavern with even more ghouls surrounding it. I just thought this was kind of a very interesting location because I highly doubt most players would venture all the way over here. And your reward for coming to these caverns is absolutely nothing. There is literally nothing inside of them. Now, it is worth noting, though, that in Devil's Throat, you can actually get some pretty good loot. You have some reinforced combat armor, a party hat, and the best one of all, the CZ-57 Avenger. But besides that, there's not much reason to come over to this part of the map. I think this part may have had a larger role, but because of New Vegas's rush development, a lot in this area was probably cut from the final game, so we're just stuck with these two random caverns, and not much else. Anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed this video of the Unexplored Mojave. If you have any recommendations for a future video, please post them in the comments section below. And, as always, until next time. Hello everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome back to the Unexplored Mojave. Today we're going to be checking out the Grub and Gulp rest stop. Now, this is a location I kind of avoided talking about for so long because, at least for me, this is a location I always go to in Fallout New Vegas, but I realize not everyone might go to the location here because really there's not much here besides a place to rest up and get some water if you're playing on hardcore mode. But at this point, the goal of this series is to cover pretty much every location in Fallout New Vegas, so we'll go ahead and check out this location. Now, this location probably receives a lot of player traffic just because it's right on the way to New Vegas on the path that the game pushes you towards during the main quest. Now here on the Pip-Boy, you can see the location of the Grub and Gulp rest stop. It is just northeast of the RepCon headquarters, right on your path to New Vegas from Novak. Now over here we have kind of like a collapsed billboard. There's no art or design on it, and we have a lot of these makeshift beds, signaling that this is a rest stop for travelers in the post-apocalypse. On this campfire we can also find a squirrel on a stick, along with an iguana on a stick. So obviously some people were having some snacks before finishing their journey towards New Vegas. Over here we have a shack, but it is boarded up, signaling that nobody lives in it, and on the side of the shack we have some bottle caps, one of them being a Star Sunset Sarsaparilla bottle cap that we can take without it being considered stealing, so a pretty good find. We have a Brahmin pin, and then 3 stalls where we can buy goods. The first stall has nobody in it, so we can't buy anything. The next stall has Lupe, who will sell us water. She can sell us purified water and dirty water, depending on if we have the caps. In the next stall, we can find Fitz, who will sell us food. And he also has some helpful information about the Grab and Gulp rest stop, so let's see what he has to say.
I do decent enough. The NCR patrols usually stop by for a quick bite, and travelers like yourself pass by a couple times a week.
So from Fitz, we can learn that the main clients at this area are NCR patrols, along with a couple of travelers every week. Pretty small operation going on here, and we can see the food that Fitz is selling. And with that, that's pretty much everything at this rest stop. Now, from time to time, there will be traveling merchants coming through, and they will have much better trading loot than Fitz and Lupe. So definitely be on the lookout for some merchants. As you can see here, their inventory, they have some good weapons and a lot of ammunition. Also, he has a lot more caps for trading. Now, one thing I wanted to mention, I found it weird that this shack doesn't have an interior. It kind of suggests that these two merchants just sleep outside, which seems kind of odd to me, since, it would make a lot more sense for them to actually live in this shack. Now, perhaps they do live in the shack and they keep it boarded up in order to prevent intruders. And two more things of note. In the background, we can see two billboards advertising the Lucky 38 Casino and the Tops Casino. And more importantly, if you fast travel here, there is a chance you will be attacked by Legion assassins. However, if you're a high level, like I was when I first came to this location to just check it out and scout before the video, those Legion assassins will also attack the NPCs here, likely killing Fitz and Lupe. So do be careful, especially if you're a higher level. Also, Fitz and Lupe are tied to the NCR's reputation system. So if you have low reputation with the NCR, Fitz and Lupe will unfortunately attack you and you will have to kill them. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this episode of the Unexplored Mojave. If you have any recommendations for a future video, please drop them in the comments section below. And, as always, until next time. Hello everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome back to the Unexplored Mojave. Today we're going to be checking out the Mojave House, also known as the Mojave Home. In the game files, it's known as Mojave Home. However, in the official game guide and on the wiki, it is called Mojave House. So that is what I will refer to it as. This is a small location just north of the New Vegas Clinic and Mole Rat Ranch. Now this is an unmarked location, but there are some interesting features about this house, so let's check it out. And as I said earlier, just north of Mole Rat Ranch and New Vegas Medical Clinic, we can find the Mojave House. Now real quick, I mentioned it before, but I wanted to show Mole Rat Ranch one more time, because I fast traveled here and I was actually shocked to find that the mole rats and the Brahmin will respawn. Normally, when you come here the first time for an average player, this Brahmin will kill all of the mole rats, but here we can see the mole rats are now alive, and they're just singing a nice little song in their own pools of blood. Now, moving on to the Mojave Home, we start in this kind of cornfield with a lot of maize, however, we cannot loot any of it. And there's like two water cisterns to our east, and then we can find a cactus in the back under this electric tower. Then if we head to the actual house, we can find a mailbox, and I assume this is the front of the building, and there was actually fixing things inside the mailbox, because there's a car and it's facing the road. However, the way I understood it on the wiki, it considered this other side the front entrance. So don't really know what the front is, whatever side, I don't think it really matters. In this part of the house, we have two lawn chairs and a refrigerator containing various alcohol. Now, to get into the house is an average picked lock, and picking this lock will result in negative karma, despite the fact nobody lives here, and taking anything in the house is not considered stealing. Maybe just a programming oversight. Inside of the refrigerator, we can find a lot more alcohol, and of course, some moonshine on the table. And if you haven't noticed, there's a lot of maize inside of this house, just kind of growing for no reason, but there is a reason. Whoever owned this house was brewing moonshine. So, kind of interesting, and they just kind of turned it into a forest of corn. And as you saw inside the house, we have a first aid box with random loot, we have some ammunition boxes, and next to the bed is an unlocked wall safe, again with random loot. There's also a generator that is turned on inside, and we can't do anything about it. But that is everything for the Mojave Home, or Mojave House. Either name is perfectly acceptable. Anyways, I thought this location was kind of funny, kind of interesting. I just really like the character that Obsidian threw into this random house. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Unexplored Mojave. If you have any recommendations for a future video, please drop them in the comments section below. And, as always, until next time. Hello everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome back to the Unexplored Mojave. Today we're going to be looking at the Mojave Railroad. If you've ever played Fallout New Vegas, then you've definitely seen that there is a railroad that spans across the entire map. And it's kind of random on where it goes. I wanted to see if there's any rhyme and reason to this railroad. This is a video I've been wanting to make for a long time because it just seems like a really fun idea, but I've kept putting it off. So here we are finally, and I have to say, I am fucking confused. This railroad actually makes no freaking sense, and it is difficult to navigate. I fought over a dozen Deathclaws just walking across the entire damn thing. So, let's see where this railroad leads us, and let's just see how chaotic its design really is. So I decided to start on the very southern part of the map where the railroad begins, at Crescent Canyon East. Now, here we can see the railroad entering New Vegas on a bridge. Also, there's a lot of golden geckos in this area, so be ready if you want to come check it out for yourself. And we can see that this bridge has collapsed into Crescent Canyon, and that this bridge, since it's collapsed, we cannot leave the Mojave Wasteland. If you want to know more about this location, I'll post a link to my Crescent Canyon Unexplored Mojave episode in the description below. There are several locations in this video, so if you want to know more about those locations, I'll put the links in the description below. But besides that, there really isn't much there, just a collapsed bridge, and that is where the railroad begins. As we make our way up the railroad near the Mojave Drive-In and Bradley Shack, we can climb up to see that there is a tunnel. This tunnel has no known exit, but it's just suggested that this tunnel could also be used to access the Mojave Wasteland via railroad. Now, if you don't know, the railroad is actually in use, or was in use, by the NCR. They were able to repurpose a lot of the railroad in order to make cement, in order to build fortifications in the Mojave Wasteland. Now, as we get close to Nipton, we can see the Welcome to California sign, and we can find a railroad crossing along the road here. And this railroad crossing is going to be something important to remember for later in this video, so just kind of keep that in the back of your head. Then we continue our journey north along the railroad, and we can find Coyote Den. This is the location of the first episode of the Unexplored Mojave. We have this crashed truck with a skeleton and 2 suitcases. I didn't mention that in my first episode of the Unexplored Mojave, so a little bit of a bonus there. And usually there's coyotes in this den, but there were none for me. Usually they respawn, but yeah, there were none for me. We can see the railroad was blocked off by some boulders, and we can make our way north to the Emergency Service Rail Yard. This is an old rail yard that was obviously used for repairing trains and probably emergency situations. We can see 2 cranes, one of which is collapsed, along with some towers. Perhaps they're for oil or gas or diesel or something, I don't really know. There's 2 beds here, and there are a lot of bottle caps. There's actually 2 Sunset Sarsaparilla bottle caps, so a pretty good find. But besides that, there's really not a whole lot in this area, and I have mentioned this area in a past video, specifically my Dead Wind Cavern video. But as we can see, it's just kind of an old repair yard for trains. We can see the tracks split off, but this one immediately ends, and there's nothing there. So we will continue going north, following this railroad into Powder Ganger territory. As I began my journey north, I immediately noticed that there was a prospector. And I was really confused why a prospector was all the way out here. Perhaps he just spawns near the emergency service rail yard, but when I tried to talk to him, he started running away for some reason. I don't know why or where he was going. There weren't any enemies that I was aware of. And when I came up over this rock, he had stopped running and was just staring off into the distance. Yeah, I'm not sure what he was doing out here, but, I thought it was kind of interesting, and I just kind of wanted to record my journey along the railroad. Here we can find the Powder Ganger camp south, and this is just a camp, a small camp, that acts as a fast travel point around the NCR Correctional Facility. Then we can make our way north towards Jean, which is a town also near Good Springs. Jean skydiving is off in the distance, and below Jean skydiving are several pools of water, along with some boat flies. And I just thought it was interesting because boat flies are not so common in New Vegas. They are a very easy enemy, but since Mojave is a desert, there aren't many pools of water where boat flies like to hang around, but here in Jean, we do have some. We can continue our way up, and we find another railroad crossing along with Ringo's crashed or ambushed caravan and some powder gangers. I decided not to fight them because it's just not worth my time, and I continue to make my way north past the NCR Correctional Facility. Along the highway here, we can find an ambushed Brahmin or caravan, and there's nothing really on the body. I just thought it was interesting. And then as we move north more, we can find this collapsed truck, which just had a ton of food in it, along with a doctor's bag. And I just thought it was really interesting, something I never really knew existed, and it's probably be pretty good if you need emergency health. Now, as we keep on moving north, I found this bridge. This is an unmarked bridge or location in Fallout New Vegas. I've never talked about this in this series before, so here it is. It is making its first appearance in this video. It features a bridge with a railroad going over the top, and then a bright follower, a dead bright follower on the bottom, who has random energy weapon and loot. But, not much besides that. And then we can continue our way further north. Here we just got a majestic look at the bridge, and we will go past Sloan. I'm not going to talk much about Sloan because I haven't covered it yet in this series, but I'm sure we'll get to it. And as we reach the outer portions of Quarry Junction, we will find a small shack and a railroad platform. I'm pretty confident in saying that this railroad platform was probably used by the NCR and during the pre-war era to load materials onto trains. If you don't know, the NCR was using Quarry Junction in order to make cement. They loaded the trains here with the material, and they took the trains to Boulder City, where the cement was made. And as we continued further down, we came to the I-15 junction, and this is where my story with the Death Claws began. There were so many freaking Death Claws here, more than I've ever remembered in Fallout New Vegas at this specific area. When I made my I-15 junction video, I encountered a few Death Claws at this location, but this time there were about 7 or 8 Death Claws that I had to kill. I'm not sure if it's because I'm a high level, if it's completely random, or if it's just really, really, really bad luck. But no matter the reason, I had to kill all of these Death Claws, but with an anti-material rifle and being a level 50, it was actually pretty easy, but it did take up some time. And then this building in front of me is the Junction 15 railway station. Sorry, I said Junction I-15, it's just Junction 15. The interstate next to me is Interstate 15 or I-15, which is why I said that. Here, the railroad splits into two. Part of it goes east, and part of it continues north. So for the time being, I decided to go ahead and follow it east to see where this section of the railroad ends. I knew if I kept following it north, it would go on for a long time. Eventually, we run into the train station at REPCONN headquarters. Obviously, this train station was probably used for workers at REPCONN HQ. Also, there's a small playground next to the train station, which I thought was interesting. As we move forward, we come to the Followers' Outpost. This outpost obviously used to be some kind of train yard. Perhaps it was used by the NCR, but maybe they've since abandoned it. It would obviously be useful, though, for delivering supplies to the Mojave Wasteland. Eventually, then, as we continue further east, we arrive at Boulder City, specifically Boulder City Train Station. Here we can find a caravan and a merchant, along with some buildings and facilities for making cement. This was used by the NCR to make cement for a significant amount of time before Death Claws took over Quarry Junction. After that, we can find the railroad is in major disrepair, and it kind of just abruptly ends. And this is where things start to get a little bit confusing or frustrating. As we follow the railroad, we can see it really goes nowhere. It just kind of goes into a hill, and then there is the road. We don't know if it ends here, or if it were to continue, maybe go towards Hoover Dam. And there's no indication about where the railroad would go from here. So we're just left to assume that the end of the line is in Boulder City, and for whatever reason, the railroad continues significantly after the train yard. Here we can find some destroyed buildings, next to the road where one might assume the railroad would go, but obviously it doesn't. And as we move further up the road, we can see that the train obviously would not continue because there's no room for train tracks. Because the main road goes in between of these rocks, kind of in this ditch, and there's no space for a railroad, and there's no indication there is a railroad here. Now, I found it interesting, if you look at the mini-map, it looks like the railroad actually curves to the left, and in the in-game, it curves to the right, but it looks like it might have supposed to have been going left, and maybe it was just an oversight or something, and perhaps it does go towards Lake Mead, or it's supposed to go towards Hoover Dam. Either way, this is the end of the line for this eastern route. We cannot follow this railroad any further. So we will head back to the Junction 15 station. Real quick, I made this crudely drawn map to kind of show the layout of the railroad. Here we can see the two southern entry points into the Mojave, along with the platform stations and rail yards that we've come across so far, and we shall continue to expand this map. Heading back to the Junction 15 railway station, we will continue our journey north towards New Vegas. We can see the Tops billboard and the Lucky 38 in the background. Eventually we came across this bridge which goes over Interstate 15 and then the Sampson rock crushing plant. Now there's no train platform here, however we might assume that the rock crushing plant would have used the train in order to carry those rocks. I mean, that's a lot of stuff that they have to move to this plant. However, there's no indication that the rock plant used the railway. As we continue our way north, we're going to go into Fiend territory, and this will lead us to New Vegas Steel, along with the South Vegas ruins. And near New Vegas Steel is a platform. The steel plant, or this other bombed out building, probably used the railway in order to transport their goods. Obviously, New Vegas Steel is still occupied by its robotic employees, so perhaps they're waiting for the next train to come on by. As we make our way north, we will come by the Sunset Sarsaparilla headquarters. I don't know if Sunset Sarsaparilla would have used a railway, but it seems like that's something they would want to use in order to transport their product, but there's no indication they did so. Now, this is something I wanted to mention. Sometimes in New Vegas, there is no railway crossing. Here we are in the middle of New Vegas, and we can see that this road just kind of combines with the railway. There is no crossing, which is very unsafe. So maybe in the New Vegas universe, railway laws and road laws are not nearly as developed. Also here, the road just kind of abruptly ends, and Obsidian just threw in roadblocks instead of actually ending the road. I just thought this was really funny and kind of maybe lazy. But anyways, the railway continues towards Freeside, and it is now blocked off with this wall. So we will have to travel to Freeside in order to continue following the railway. And on the other side of the wall, we can see that the railway does indeed continue, so an A+ for continuity from Bethesda. And there's also some kind of train station, it would appear, or perhaps a rail yard. Now, from here, the railway splits into two. Part of it kind of goes towards the H&H Tools factory. However, when I went to the H&H Tools factory, I couldn't find the railroad. I couldn't find anywhere where it would have gone. Perhaps it's just blocked off and behind one of these buildings and is inaccessible. Perhaps the railway is supposed to continue north, or perhaps it's just a rail yard. For the purpose of this video, we're going to assume this is a station and a rail yard, and that this railway going left does not go anywhere besides a dead end. Then we can continue to follow the main railroad here, and it'll take us through Freeside. Definitely, if you've been to Freeside, you've probably seen the railway, but, you know, maybe you didn't pay much attention to it. And that's a big reason I wanted to make this video is while we play New Vegas, of course we see the railroad, but we never really pay much mind to it. So I wanted to kind of see where it goes and see if there's any rhyme or reason to it. Eventually, though, the railway does indeed end in Freeside, and we have to go outside once again. It comes out near the Crimson Caravan Trading Company. Then as we head east, we will eventually reach Nellis Air Force Base, or the Boomers. And even on the railroad, there are warning signs to not enter. Of course, at this point, I'm already friendly with the Boomers. And then we come to another fork in the railroad. Part of it kind of branches off towards Nellis Air Force Base, and part of it goes into this tunnel. So first we will head towards Nellis Air Force Base, and the railroad will take us to this second gate for Nellis Air Force Base. So obviously this railroad was used by the US military during the pre-war. It was actually probably quite important to United States infrastructure during the war era. And then eventually, as we continue to follow the railroad through Nellis Air Force Base, I found this parking lot. Never realized this parking lot was here, so I just thought I would show it. And then we come to the end of the line, just a small rail yard, and the railroad doesn't continue north anymore. So right now we actually have a complete kind of layout for a lot of the New Vegas Railway. As we can see from the southernmost part to the northernmost part, it actually makes a lot of sense, but we do get a little confused when we head over to Boulder City. Alright then, let's continue on from the train tunnel. So Train Tunnel is a kind of famous or perhaps infamous location in Fallout New Vegas because it is protected by a very hard lock. So many players never go inside. It was intended for players to use to kind of sneak past the boomers. However, when most players encounter the boomers, they're a very low level, and there's no way they would have 100 lockpick. But inside, we can find a lot of ghouls. These ghouls do respawn, and if you've seen my video on Train Tunnel, then you know these ghouls are always here. Also, there's a ton of frag mines inside of this location. On the other side, you have to be incredibly careful because you will likely be ambushed by death claws. And for whatever reason, there were a lot more death claws than the first time I came here a long time ago in my Train Tunnel video. Again, I assume it's because of my high level, but perhaps it's just dumb luck. I sent that death claw flying, and I killed his baby. And after killing all of the death claws, we can continue our journey east to Gypsum Train Yard. Gypsum used to be a mine where they probably mined gypsum, and there is a train yard here. Now this is actually based also on a real life location, so obviously there is a real rail network within real life Las Vegas. Here we have a lot of trains or boxcars within the rail yard and a locomotive. However, we can assume the NCR was never able to utilize these trains because it seems like the boomers would have caused them a lot of trouble. So perhaps the NCR only used the rail network between Quarry Junction and Boulder City. Also here we can find some kind of train platform, perhaps for workers at the mine. Then we can continue our journey even further east, and we come to the end of the line at Lake Mead. Here at Calville Bay, we can see there used to be a crane and that this area was probably used in the pre-war era in order to A, load materials from Lake Mead onto the trains, or to load off materials from the trains for whatever operations were going on at Lake Mead. And then here on our crudely drawn map, we can see the complete layout of the New Vegas railway system. This was a really fun experience, and I had a lot of fun navigating this railway. Thankfully, all of the railway is on the map, right? Well, no, actually, there is a portion of the freaking railroad that is not marked on the map. If you ever played New Vegas, you've probably realized I have missed a large section of railroad, especially down by Novak. So let's head on down and see what there is. So down here by Ranger Station Charlie, we will, well, A, find a lot of enemies like mole rats and golden geckos, but we will also find this sealed train tunnel. I've talked about this train tunnel before in my Dead Wind Cavern video, and this tunnel kind of makes me angry because it doesn't go anywhere. However, after thinking about it, I do have a theory. So we will talk about that later. But for now, this railroad kind of begins near Dead Wind Cavern, which is one of the most difficult locations in Fallout New Vegas. We can then follow the railroad past Ranger Station Charlie, and this railroad then continues up towards Novak. There's the all-famous dinosaur, and of course a tumbleweed going across the tracks. Kind of a very scenic, kind of western shot. I love it. We have a railroad crossing, or not really a crossing, just kind of good luck, hope a train doesn't hit you as you drive across crossing. And this is when I noticed the railroad is actually marked on the map as an actual road. The road here splits off, as you can see, and attaches to this other road that heads towards Novak. But the railroad itself is considered a drivable road, unlike the other railroad, which is indicated by a smaller line. So that's kind of interesting, don't know why that is, but we can follow this railroad past Old Lady Gibson's scrapyard all the way to Helios 1, where the railroad just ends, abruptly. And there's no rhyme or reason to any of this. And here you can see on the mini-map, the road, Helios 1, and the scrapyard. Don't know what's going on here, but I do have a theory. And here is what I think. Here we can see on the mini-map this small section of the railway. However, if you remember, the railway also ends in Boulder City, and it appears that the railway was beginning to curve to the south. And my theory is this, that in the pre-war era, the US military, or just some kind of government entity or company, was trying to expand the railroad down south towards Helios 1, and that train tunnel was supposed to connect up with the major original railroad. However, perhaps the project was never finished. This would explain why that tunnel doesn't have an exit. Perhaps the other side of it just wasn't constructed yet, and it explains why this section of the railroad actually doesn't show up on the minimap, because it was never used during the pre-war era. It was simply under construction. So I wanted to investigate and see if there was any evidence for my theory. However, I was a bit disappointed. As we go from Helios 1 to Boulder City, we do come across a construction site. However, they were obviously just building the interstate here. You can see the end of the road there and a lot of building materials. Perhaps they were also going to build the railroad, but there's no real indication that they were going to do so. However, this area, for the most part, next to the El Dorado Dry Lake is very flat, and we can easily get over to Boulder City if we cross a hill. They would have needed a lot of land movers, but it would be possible, I think, to connect Boulder City towards Helios 1 via railroad. So that is my theory, and this is the final map. The dotted line and question marks are Otter's theory, so it's not official, obviously, but I think it looks like a pretty good map with those sections filled in. It makes a lot more sense, to me, at least. And if you can't tell, I'm not an expert when it comes to railroads or trains, so if you have any input or know anything that I didn't mention, please feel free to post it in the comments section below. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Unexplored Mojave. I really had a lot of fun making this episode and doing something a little bit different with this series. If you guys have any recommendations for locations or an idea you would like to see in the Unexplored Mojave, please post it in the comments section below. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, until next time. Hello everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome back to the Unexplored Mojave. Today we're going to be checking out Primm Pass. This is a location I actually didn't realize existed in the game, and this was recommended to me by Chungus666. Thank you so much for the recommendation, Chungus. He's been watching my videos for a really long time, so huge shout out to him. Primm Pass is a location that is east of Primm, right next to the emergency service rail yard, and it provides a shortcut to the player from Primm to Novac. However, it is guarded by a blind Deathclaw, which is an extremely difficult enemy to fight, and if you were a new player playing New Vegas as a beginner, obviously that would be quite the challenge. So let's jump into Primm Pass. And here on the Pip-Boy, you can see the location of Primm Pass right in between Emergency Service Rail Yard, Harper's Shack, next to Dead Wind Cavern, and then Primm is to the west. Like I said, this would provide a significant shortcut from Primm to Novac, but there is a blind Deathclaw guarding it, which makes it kind of inaccessible for new players. Now, you have to go up this hill, and there's a truly immaculate view of the Mojave Wasteland, and then we can find the pass. And inside of the pass, we can find some skeletons and a dead Bright Follower. Also, apparently sometimes there will be a prospector here. However, usually the prospector will be killed by the Deathclaw. I didn't see any prospector or dead prospector here. Now, it's also worth noting, you might be thinking, hey, Otter, it's a blind Deathclaw, how dangerous could it be? But actually, blind Deathclaws are more powerful, or just have better stats, than a regular Deathclaw. Blind Deathclaw has +1 perception, because his other senses are enhanced. So, for a new player, this might be extremely difficult, but for me, level 50, anti-material rifle, And of course, the riot gear, it was a pretty one-sided fight. And after killing the Deathclaw, the pass comes out on top of Harper's Shack. I've actually talked about Harper's Shack in my Dead Wind Cavern video, so definitely check out that video if you want to know more about Dead Wind Cavern. And if you don't know, it's one of the most difficult locations in the game, so even after killing the Blind Deathclaw, you're not completely out of the woods yet. As you can see up here, there are several Deathclaws. I decided to pull out my explosive rounds, and I was able to deal with them pretty efficiently. However, if you were a lower player character, you could probably sneak past, and you could also use Harper's Shack as a kind of like housing or temporary base as you try to navigate away from Dead Wind Cavern. And off in the distance, we can actually see the RepCon test site. However, it is inaccessible to the player character without using some kind of glitch, like the reload dash maybe. I didn't try it, but there is an invisible wall here that prevents us from accessing that part of the map. Now, one last thing I wanted to mention is Primm Pass is actually based on a real-world location, that being the Makula Mountain Range in Clark County, Nevada, and within the mountain range is Makula Pass. So, a pretty kind of cool nod and just a really amazing secret that I never knew existed in Fallout. I would love to try and attempt getting around that Deathclaw as a low level. Perhaps a video for another day. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Unexplored Mojave. If you have any recommendations for a future video, please drop them in the comment section below. And, as always, until next time. Hello everyone, the Army of Otters here, and welcome back to the Unexplored Mojave. Today we're going to be checking out Cazador Nest. This is a location that I never knew about before. Actually, when I was making my railroad video, I stumbled upon this location, so I wanted to cover it because I never knew about it. I never knew that there were so many Cazadors in this area, and I just thought it was a really awesome location and a part of the map I really never explored before. So, let's go ahead and check out this location. And then here on the minimap, you can see the location of Cazador Nest, near the El Dorado Gaston Service and Ranger Station Delta, right in the middle. And as you approach, as the name would imply, there's going to be a metric fuck ton of Cazadors. However, I have learned that going after their wings is extremely OP. Also using fire is also another good tactic. Here, there were 3 Cazadors, and from far away, I was able to take them out with one shot from the anti-material rifle. And I have to say, this sequence of events made me feel like a complete and total badass. I got 2 of them just by aiming, and 1 through VATS. So, pretty fun, but after killing this Cazador as he tried to run away, little bitch, then I actually got caught in the middle of a battle against several Cazadors. They approached me, and one of them managed to hit me, so I had to use some anti-venom in order to stop the effects. And after that, though, killing all the Cazadors, I was able to then move in to their nest. Obviously, Cazadors are one of the most famous enemies in Fallout New Vegas, and I kind of hope they return in future Fallout titles, just because I think they're a very dynamic and difficult enemy, and I actually kind of enjoy fighting them now. Maybe that's an unpopular opinion, though. At the nest, we can find a dead Brahmin, and then inside we can find 2 skeletons, along with what appears to be another dead animal. Maybe it's a Brahmin or something else. And we can find an adventurer's pack, which has ammunition, a weapon, and other goods inside of it, along with an explosives crate that has several, who would have guessed, explosives. Now, the nest itself is just a small cave, and there's nothing really inside of the cave, unfortunately, just kind of a hole in the side of this mountain. Now, there's also a hollowed out rock right beside the cave, which will contain random loot. And I decided to go towards the north, and we have all of these like rolling hills, and I've never really explored this area too extensively, and to be honest, there isn't a whole lot out here, just mounds and hills, and there are also some other Cazadors in this area. So definitely be on the lookout if you come over here, especially if you're a lower level. Please be careful. But using the anti-material rifle against him actually proved to be a pretty decent choice because I can one-shot most of them. And one last thing that is worth noting is on top of the nest, or right next to the nest, is this small mountain, or it's really just a hill. This is not a mountain. But on this hill, we can find some ammunition crates, both of which are locked. One is easy and one is average, which contains some ammunition, of course. And there's also a campfire on the very top of this mound. Also, from up here, you can get some incredible views, some of the best, I think, in all of New Vegas. You can see Novak, you can see Helios 1, you can see New Vegas, and you can see Boulder City. A very, very beautiful area that I never knew existed in Fallout until now. Just kind of shows that this game is the gift that keeps on giving. Also, an interesting fact about this location: in the German, Italian, French, and Spanish versions of New Vegas, this place is actually called Mole Rat Nest, kind of indicating that this was originally going to be an area for mole rats, but obviously the developers changed that towards the end of development, and the name in other language releases of the game remained the same, Mole Rat Nest. I have learned so much about New Vegas over the course of this series, and this is another example of how much I have to learn about this game still. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this episode of the Unexplored Mojave. If you have any recommendations for a future video or future location, please post them in the comments section below. And, as always, until next time.